Everybody knows the saying, I think, therefore I am. But sometimes, your body starts moving before your brain even kicks in. Suddenly, this woman yells out a kid's name, Rudy, and demands to know if he even realizes how expensive that plate was. The poor kid, voice shaking, begged Ramanda for forgiveness. The woman ripped into him, saying he couldn't even wash dishes right, calling him a good-for-nothing. Ramanda raised her hand to strike. But in that instant, the main character rushed over and stopped her. The woman, totally outraged, demanded to know what the director was doing. It all started when the main character picked up a book. Back then, she lived in a city with 1 million unemployed young people. Just another face in the crowd looking for a job. Her situation was rougher than most. Orphaned, raised in a group home, and only a high school diploma to her name. She had no connections, no fancy education to fall back on. Landing a job seemed damn near impossible, but somehow, against all odds, she found work at some hole-in-the-wall company. Just when she thought she'd found some stability, the company tanked, and she was back on the streets. But going back to the group home and telling them what happened, she just couldn't bring herself to do it. Even as an adult, she stayed there, helping out with money, and the kids all called her Big Sis. She felt like she was practically the head of that family, especially since the place was barely staying afloat as it was. But no matter how hard she tried, the group home eventually shut down, and she grilled the director about what would happen to the kids. She was hit with this crushing feeling of loss, guilt, and helplessness because she couldn't protect those little ones. Those feelings just ate her up inside. She wandered the streets aimlessly and ended up just reading books at a rental shop. Just when she was about to lose interest, one story grabbed her attention. A book called Eternal Scar. The book was packed to the gills with every cliché you can imagine. The main dude and the girl grew up in the same orphanage. The orphanage director was a total monster. She abused the kids and even got them mixed up in some shady stuff. They called her the absolute worst, and she was always yelling at them to shut their traps. The title, Eternal Scar, referred to a scar on the girl's thigh that the director gave her. The funny thing is, that scar is what helped the main guy recognize her years later. Later, like the book said, the main guy led a revolt and became emperor, then hunted down the old director. By then, she was working in the mines. And the main guy, without a second thought, ordered her to be taught a lesson she wouldn't forget. And then he offed her right in front of the main character, who noted the scene was like, super graphic. So yeah, she couldn't believe this book was supposed to be for everyone. Anyway, the story ended with the hero and heroine falling head over heels for each other. Then, the main character wondered if she'd somehow ended up in the orphanage director's body because she was too into the story. She was okay with getting kicked out of the store, because she was broke, but dying in the street? Total bummer. The girl figured she should be grateful it was over quick, because she's terrified of pain. Not that it mattered now, since she was basically destined to get torn to shreds by the hero. The heroine was freaking out about it, thinking, seriously? Once you're dead, right? She swore to herself, no way am I letting the story play out like that. The lunch bell rang, and she thought, all right, even if I'm in danger, gotta feed these kids first. She remembered how, in her past life, the orphanage always made sure they ate well. Catching a whiff of something, she figured it was soup day, just as she bumped into some kid in the hallway. Clearly spooked, the little girl apologized to the headmistress, saying she didn't see her standing there. The main character asked the girl if she was hurt, and after making sure she was okay, told her to go eat. But the girl thought the headmistress's smile looked kinda creepy. The little girl bowed, addressing the headmistress as ma'am, and bolted out of the dining hall, leaving our hero wondering if she was planning to eat lunch outside. Our main character heard a crash coming from the dining hall. Sounded like something went down. A caregiver, Ramanda, was yelling at some girl named Rudy. The woman was raging, asking her if she even knew how much that plate cost. She claimed it was the director's favorite plate, and Rudy, sobbing, was trying to apologize to Ramanda. But Ramanda just kept yelling, calling Rudy a worthless screw-up who couldn't even wash a dish right. That's when another kid stepped in for Rudy, saying she already apologized. But Ramanda just snapped and slapped Clone, telling him to stay out of it. She sneered that if apologies fixed everything, we wouldn't need rules in the first place. Clone shot back that it's not like the plate was indestructible. Plus, doing dishes is the caretaker's job. When someone actually dared to say that to her face, she asked, completely outraged, if he was serious right now. At that moment, her rage seemed to hit its limit, and she wound up to strike. Another scared kid ran up to his friends, yelling, "Don't you dare!" and shielding them from the blow. That's when everyone noticed the director standing in the doorway, and the kids whispered her name in surprise and fear. Ramonda spun around and asked the director what she was doing. The director, totally ticked off, snapped back that Ramonda should be asking her that question. Then she noticed a worried girl with pink hair rushing over to the crying Rudy. The girl figured that kid was probably Ren, the main character, and asked Rudy if she was okay. The main character remembered that Ren, who doted on Rudy like a little sister, and the black-haired kid, Clone, were the novel's main characters. Then, her attention shifted to another kid, the oldest one at the orphanage. The girl realized with a jolt that it was a kid named Jack Frith, who doesn't even exist in the future of this novel. She couldn't believe she was seeing the novel's main characters as kids with her own two eyes. Finally, completely sure, she concluded that she really had ended up inside the book. The main character thought with horror about the conditions these kids were living in, and she realized things were way worse than she ever thought possible. That's when Ramonda asked the headmaster to let go of her arm. The headmaster asked Ramonda if she was really going to hit a kid with that hand. Ramonda started making excuses, begging her to listen. She explained that Rudy broke one of the plates the headmaster treasured so much. The woman claimed she just wanted to give the girl a little scolding, but Clone interfered and had the nerve to talk back. So she was left with no choice. The headmaster asked Ramonda if doing dishes wasn't her job, and wondered why she was making the kids do it. Then the girl remembered reading about this. The headmaster had a maid who mistreated the kids, and the headmaster only cared about the donation money. She turned a blind eye to it, and the maid's cruelty got worse. Funding from the Empire was cut due to mismanagement. Once the maid was gone, the headmaster herself started personally mistreating the kids. The current headmaster coldly told Ramonda she was fired, and Ramonda, outraged, asked her what she was talking about. She demanded an explanation, asking what she'd done to deserve being fired. Ramonda fiercely defended herself, claiming she was just doing what the headmaster told her to do before. To that, the heroine firmly replied that she never told Ramonda to mistreat the children. She added that, as far as she could see, Ramonda was even making the kids do the chores. She had assigned to Ramonda, and, brooking no argument, she ordered her to get out of there right now. As she left, Ramonda said the headmaster would regret this. The heroine thought with disgust about what kind of monster would even lay a hand on a kid, and was glad she'd managed to get rid of Ramonda. Then the girl asked the children if they were okay, but they shied away from her, giving her suspicious looks. She thought to herself with regret that seeing the novel's protagonists as children, she must have gotten ahead of herself without even realizing it. She figured that anyone who stood by and did nothing while they were being bullied was no better than the devil himself. The girl sadly concluded that, of course, the kids were going to hate her and resent her. Stumbling and struggling to find the right words, she finally whispered that she was so sorry, and she vowed that she wouldn't let the kids suffer anymore, and announced that they didn't have to do the dishes anymore, and wished them a good meal. The kids were left in the dining hall, totally confused, while the protagonist herself was horrified, thinking that what was happening was a complete nightmare, and wondered just what that woman, the previous director, had done to the kids. She firmly declared that she wouldn't let it continue, and realized she needed to get back to her office. Opening the door, she found food on the desk. The heroine thought she could finally eat a decent meal, just like she wanted, even if it was all alone. Suddenly, she remembered bumping into some little kid near the cafeteria. That killed her appetite, but she knew she still had to eat. She bitterly thought about how the kids probably made this food themselves. She repeated to herself again that this whole thing was just a freaking nightmare. And she started beating herself up, like, what kind of adult can't handle this situation? She noticed the kids had cleaned up the cafeteria anyway, which made her wonder just how badly they were treated before. She hoped they could at least relax in their rooms, but then she spotted a spider lazily crawling down nearby. Like a shot, the main character bolted out of the office and decided right then and there that she needed to turn this place around. ASAP. After looking around the orphanage, she decided to sell anything that was worth a buck. She was outraged to see the kids barely had enough to eat, while the head honcho was living like a king. She found decorations and dresses that were way fancier than what even a high-class noble would own. The main character remembered that the body's original owner, Ciela Perunt, was a low-ranking noble from the sticks. All that over-the-top luxury eventually bankrupted her, and she realized with disgust that the orphanage was falling apart, and the old director was using the orphanage donations to live the high life. No wonder Clone tore her to shreds, and that she also played a part in making the kids hate nobles. She gave her new look a critical once-over, noting that even in the simplest dress, the neckline was way too low. Still, the main character looked in the mirror and thought, "For a villain, I'm not half bad." "All right," she decided. "Time to hit the road." She figured with these long arms and legs, she could carry her own luggage. Ugh, today's gonna be a day. Gotta hit a ton of places, and then I gotta take that freaking bell off the door when I get back. Should I tell the kids I'm stepping out for a bit? Nah, that'll just freak them out. They're probably still shaken up from what happened this morning anyway. And if that thing they're scared of even gets close again, it'll just make them clam up even more. Meanwhile, the kids spotted her from the window, wondering where she was headed with all that stuff. "Yo, what's going on out there?" Jack asked. "The head honcho just left with a bunch of fancy-looking junk," Eddie replied. "That witch!" the boy exclaimed, totally pissed. Then Clone showed up, asking, "What's all the commotion about?" He had Ren on his back, looking weak and pale. Looks like the director finally made it. She thought with relief that if it weren't for that scene in the book where Claude and Ren run away, she'd probably still be wandering around lost. She remembered it was the part where they snuck off, unable to take the headmaster's bullying anymore. She recalled in the book the kids ran off to enjoy the festival, but they got caught before they could get very far. It made her wonder when the festival was this year and how old the kids even were. The main character mentally grumbled, noting that even after searching the headmaster's office and tearing through all the papers, she still couldn't find any info about the kids. Someone who doesn't even care about running the orphanage isn't likely to be interested in the kids. All she knew was that Ren came down with a terrible fever when he was 10. Finally, she decided she'd ask Jack when he got back, and that she needed to figure out what time of year it was, so she could make a plan. She approached the carriage rental place and greeted him politely, but the guy didn't answer right away because he was too busy checking her out. Annoyed, she thought that even though she'd put on one of her most inconspicuous dresses, it was still drawing attention. Then she turned to the attendant again, more insistent this time, and said she wanted to hire a carriage. The guy told her a carriage rental was 15 silver, but if she needed a driver, the price would be 35 silver. She quickly did the mental math to convert that to modern money, and was a little surprised it was cheaper than she expected, so she booked the carriage with a driver for a round trip. When they arrived at the jeweler's, the driver offered her his hand. She figured that in this world, offering an escort was just considered good manners, but she wasn't about to take the hand of someone who was looking at her like that. So she declined, saying it wasn't necessary. The girl told the driver to wait for her there, adding that she'd go in alone from this point. The jewelry store was gorgeous, the display window sparkling with light. Stepping inside, she was greeted by the jeweler. She told him she was there to sell some jewelry, and the jeweler said she'd come to the right place. He started hyping up his shop, claiming that nowhere else appreciates precious stones like they do here. The girl dumped everything she'd brought in her shawl onto the table. After looking over the goods, the jeweler remarked that they were beautiful jewels and assured her they'd live up to her expectations. The jeweler asked her to wait a bit, adding that he'd take his time and give them a closer look. While the girl waited, she thought that the jewelry seemed to be much more valuable than she'd thought. For a while, she wouldn't have to worry about funding the shelter. After a while, the jeweler confirmed that, just as he thought, all the stones were high quality, and offered 650 gold pieces for everything. She mentally converted the amount into modern money, and noted to herself that it was kind of good, though she still couldn't tell their real worth. The woman thought to herself, annoyed, that this guy had been looking down his nose at her from the jump. From the store owner's perspective, she probably looked like some clueless girl who didn't know the first thing about market prices. Then she straight up accused the jeweler of treating her like she was beneath him. When he tried to argue, asking what she meant, she firmly stated that he was trying to pull a fast one on her right then and there. In the director's office, the girl found out she'd embezzled over 1,000 gold pieces in a year. She also learned that she'd been splurging on luxury items using not just donations, but her own money too. That's why our girl was sure these jewels had to be worth more than 650 gold. The jeweler tried to defend himself, claiming she could see for herself that it was a fair and accurate appraisal, to which she dryly confirmed that she did see, and that's exactly why she knew she was right. She told him point blank that he was looking at her like some naive rich girl, and at first she thought she was just imagining it. But after hearing the price, realizing she wasn't imagining things, she asked the jeweler if he was trying to insult and swindle a noblewoman. She promised she'd make him pay for that, and the jeweler, terrified, thought it couldn't be possible. But she really was nobility. He started begging for forgiveness, saying he was super sorry. The girl asked if he now admitted he was trying to rip her off. The jeweler, stammering, insisted it wasn't a scam. He'd just adjusted the price a little, that's all. Then, with icy calm, she wondered aloud if she should shorten his lifespan a bit. She added it wasn't a threat, just a thought. And the jeweler panicked again, groveling and repeating how sorry he was. He offered to pay whatever she wanted, just please forgive him. The girl agreed, but on the condition he paid the right price this time, adding that she wasn't exactly known for her patience. The jeweler, hugely relieved, thanked her for giving him another chance and scurried away. Left alone, the girl thought her heart almost stopped from the stress of it all. She thought to herself, thank God that's over, though she didn't fully understand how she pulled it off. The girl was thinking that she'd never had any real power before, never lorded over anyone like that. The scared jeweler hurried to assure her he'd get the money right away, and she realized she couldn't keep acting like a villain. After saying goodbye to the jeweler, the heroine happily noticed that she'd managed to sell everything well. She contentedly counted the earnings, 9 runes and 50 gold, which came out to 95 million won. She then noted with indignation that the jeweler had tried to rip her off by more than a quarter, and wondered if she should report him. Then she moved on to planning her expenses, deciding that she needed to buy food and clothes for the kids with the money, and also fix up the crumbling orphanage. Selling the dresses will bring in a little more cash. However, she was overcome with worry when she thought that once she returned everything she'd taken from Ciela, things would be tight. The girl stated with regret that she couldn't get a job herself. There was so much to do and so little money. She started rattling off all the future expenses. Food for the kids, clothes, doctor's visits when they get sick. The main character remembered hearing that in Korea, it takes like 100 million to raise a single kid. She did the math in her head, totally freaked out, realizing she had to take care of 5 of them. That's 500 million, which is basically 5,000 gold. And just like that, the carriages carrying our heroine pulled up to the marketplace. The girl found herself in a super crowded market, packed tighter than sardines. She remembered that the boutique from the book only sold designer stuff, and she realized that no matter how fancy Ciel's dresses were, a shop like that would never buy used clothes. Our girl was feeling pretty down, figuring she'd be lucky if they didn't laugh her out of the place. Finally, she spotted a place that looked promising and headed inside. Someone greeted her, saying, "Welcome to Clover Fabrics. So, I was wondering if it's possible to sell some clothes here?" The shopkeeper, who's also the owner, explained that they cut and assess the clothes based on the cost of the fabric. She asked if that worked for the customer, and the girl happily said it was perfect. After looking over the items, the owner was thrilled, pointing out that each dress was bought from a high-end boutique. She excitedly listed them off, saying one dress was from Mariana's, another from Katamna's, and the third one is super exclusive. The shopkeeper asked again, like she didn't believe it, "You're really selling these?" and warned her that the price wouldn't even come close to what she paid. But the girl confirmed she was selling them all. The owner said the dresses were in excellent condition, and given the quality, offered 10 gold coins for each dress. For the discontinued one, the shopkeeper offered 15 gold, asking, "What do you say to that?" The girl quickly calculated that about 10 dresses, each worth 10 gold, would add up to more than 100 gold. While the shop owner went to get the cash, our main girl kept browsing. Something caught her eye, the kids' clothes, and she thought to herself, totally smitten, "How adorable is this stuff?" She started picturing Ren, with his pink hair, looking killer in one of those dresses, and Rudy would just be ridiculously cute in a romper. She also figured she could alter some of the outfits for Rudy herself. She was pretty handy like that. The shopkeeper came back and asked if she saw anything she liked, and she proudly pointed out that every single item in the store was handmade by her. Our girl gushed to the owner, saying it was amazing that she made such beautiful clothes herself. The owner thanked her for the compliment and handed over 164 gold. The heroine, for her part, thanked the shopkeeper and happily recounted the money. The store owner stammered that she should be the one giving thanks. Then she asked if the heroine was interested in kids' clothes, and the girl enthusiastically confirmed that she totally was. She explained she wanted to dress her little ones in some cute new outfits, so the shopkeeper asked if she had any kids. The girl confirmed, proudly stating that she had 5 of them. The shopkeeper was floored. The store owner, Miss Clover, started showing her the children's clothes. The customer noted that the fabric was durable and came in different sizes, and that the clothes were well made, so the kids would be comfortable moving around. Miss Clover said that they used leftover fabric scraps of various sizes to make the children's clothes. She noted with a touch of sadness that the clothes weren't selling great, but pointed out the fabric and design were top-notch. Then, the girl declared firmly that she'd take all the children's clothes, from here to there. Miss Clover asked in surprise, like, all 15 outfits? The girl smiled and replied that it wasn't a waste at all, and that she wanted to see the kids in new clothes. To herself, she thought that she sincerely hoped the kids would like the new looks. The girl thought that she'd like to give the clothes to the kids herself, but they'd probably freak out. Maybe going through someone else would be the better call. Meanwhile, Miss Clover announced that everything was packed, and quoted the price as 1 gold coin. The girl asked in surprise if that was for all 15 outfits. She mentally calculated that it was only about 6,001 per outfit, and asked if that wasn't too cheap. Miss Clover, a little embarrassed, explained that she was just grateful to the customer for buying them. She figured selling it for more wouldn't be right. But our girl here stood her ground, saying that wasn't cool. She said the clothes were made with love, and she was sure Miss Clover deserved to get paid what she's worth. The girl was firm, saying she wanted to pay a fair price for clothes her kids would be wearing. So Miss Clover caved and told her the real price, 3 gold coins. Our girl assured her that the kids would go nuts for these clothes and promised to be a regular customer. As she left, the girl asked her not to sell herself short again. The sun was already going down when our main character finally left the shop. The coachman was tired of waiting, even yawning a few times. Suddenly, he saw Miss Ciela with a ton of boxes and bags. He told her to hand over the goods already, and she thanked him. Then, she said to herself with a bit of sarcasm, "Ciela, honey, you're only 26, and this is already kicking your butt." The coachman asked the girl where they were headed next, and she immediately replied, "To Ciela's orphanage." Looking over her purchases, she stated with a bit of doubt that she'd bought way too much stuff. Then she remembered that in the original story, Ren and Rudy were talented at drawing, and Jack was really into art. Ciela thought hopefully that they'd like her gifts, and she also wondered about what Clone liked. She figured that since Clone was the main character, he probably liked the main heroine the most. The girl thought that if she could win Ren over, maybe Clone's heart would melt too. The heroine started making plans for the future, determined to raise the kids right and survive, unlike in the original. And after the kids were independent, she'd shut down the orphanage, live peacefully until old age, and nobody would off her. She dreamed of living her own life, noting that she'd always been tied to the orphanage. The girl concluded with a touch of irony that her new life was just slightly different, and closed her eyes. Just then, the driver announced we'd arrived. She thanked him, told him he did a good job, and asked him to take the shopping inside. Back at the orphanage, she noticed they were using magic stones as light bulbs, and figured she should buy some of those too. Then she decided if she wanted to give the kids the clothes and everything else, she needed to call Jack. She made a mental note that the kids might get spooked hearing someone coming up the stairs, so she'd have to be quiet. She quietly asked if Jack was around, and said she needed to talk to him, asking for a minute of his time. But nobody answered, so the girl decided she'd just pop in for a sec. Finding the boys' room empty, she went to Ren's and asked if she was there. Still finding no one, Ciela asked herself anxiously, "What the heck is going on?" She tried to remember if anything like this had happened in the novel. So, I figured out the kids never all disappeared together. Only Ren and Claude ran away. And just then the coachman said he'd moved everything. But the main character was freaking out and cut him off, begging for help. She screamed in desperation that the kids were gone, and pleaded with him to help her find them. Ciela tried to calm herself, saying they couldn't have gone far, but worriedly noted that the novel's plot had changed. She reasoned that if this were the original story, the kids running away wouldn't be a bad thing. After all, it's better to escape and find a way to survive than be abused. But the heroine declared passionately that she wasn't the old Ciela. The heroine tried to analyze the situation, figuring that since Rudy wasn't there, the kids couldn't have gone far. She admitted she didn't understand why the plot had changed, because cautious and cold-blooded Jack would never run away with the kids. Meanwhile, Jack called out to Clone and said that maybe they should ask the director for help now. Clone countered that Jack knew perfectly well that that old bat wouldn't help them for anything. He reminded him what happened the last time Rudy got sick and how the head honcho reamed them out for crying. Then Rudy, calling Jack bro, anxiously asked if Ren was going to kick the bucket. Ren really looked out of it, burning up with a crazy fever, barely able to breathe. Jack gently chided Rudy, telling her not to talk like that. Rudy, still freaked out, asked what they'd do if the bad guys showed up. Jack tried to calm her down, saying everything was cool, and as long as they were together, they'd be all right. Then, he gently touched Ren's face and cursed under his breath in despair, 'cause Ren's temperature had spiked big time. Bitterly, he admitted to himself that he shouldn't have brought Ren and Rudy along. The kid hadn't expected the streets to be so packed, and he wondered in desperation where he could even ask for help. During the break, Eddie was griping about being exhausted and having blisters, and Rudy was whining about her feet hurting. After a bit, Clone suggested they get moving if everyone was rested up. The kid tried to take a step, but his legs started to buckle. That's when Jack stopped him and offered to carry Ren so Clone could catch a break. Clone started arguing, saying Jack was weaker, but Jack fired back, insisting that wasn't true. He fiercely claimed he was strong enough to take the load. Then Clone reminded Jack that he always gave his food rations to the others and asked how he was supposed to have any energy. Just then, someone called out to the kids, and they all turned around, surprised. The stranger loudly asked where they were headed, and he told the little guys that a certain lady had been desperately searching for them. The kids asked back in amazement, "What lady are you talking about?" Meanwhile, the headmistress kept searching. She realized with growing despair that they were nowhere to be found. She couldn't track them down anywhere. She worried to herself, wondering if they'd already made it to the slums. The girl wondered if she should go to the city watch, and in desperation asked herself, what was she supposed to do? She remembered how the little girl had cried. She'd called the girl sister and said she didn't want to go to another orphanage. The girl asked him why she couldn't stay and live with him, reminding him that she'd said she'd be her mom. The headmistress, filled with determination, told herself she'd look around one more time and that she had to find them. Just then, the coachman called out to her, shouting that she needed to come over here, that he'd found the kids, and urging her to hurry. Hearing that, the girl whispered, "Thank goodness!" with immense relief. She hauled ass to the scene, and the guys saw our main character rolling up, totally winded. They figured she was about to blow a gasket and ask what the heck they were doing out here. But instead of yelling and screaming, she gave them a big, gentle hug, so tight Clone could barely breathe. The girl, super relieved, said she was just so glad they were all right, but she immediately second-guessed herself, remembering that Ciela and the kids weren't exactly huggy-kissy. She worried that maybe they'd start avoiding her because of it, and that she shouldn't have switched up her behavior so suddenly. The heroine figured she just made things awkward, then turned to Jack and asked him why they left the orphanage, even though she was sure they ran away because of her. Suddenly, Rudy's head popped out from behind Jack. The girl explained real quick that Ren got sick, and the director, horrified, repeated, "She got sick?" Looking at the pink-haired girl, she exclaimed, "Oh my God," and asked how long she'd been like this. Jack said that Ren's fever spiked right after she left. Rudy said they tried everything to bring it down, but it just kept getting worse, and they were thinking of taking her to the hospital. The headmistress said bitterly that, of course, a dump like this orphanage wouldn't have any medicine. Ciela scooped up the sick girl in her arms. The main character went to the coachman, told him the girl needed to get to a hospital ASAP, and asked if that was even possible. The guy agreed without hesitation and promised to get the carriage ready right away. The girl knew Rudy was too young to bring along, so she wondered what she should do. Suddenly, Jack announced loudly that he'd take responsibility and get the rest of the kids back to the orphanage. Those words sparked a furious reaction from Clone. He asked if his brother actually trusted this person? "Jack, knock it off!" Clona heard him bark. The driver yelled, "All aboard! Let's get this show on the road!" Ciela turned to Jack. "You remember the way back, right?" The kid gave her the thumbs up. "Got it memorized." The director said, "I'm counting on you, kid. Be careful on the way back now. And hey," she added, "if you guys get hungry, feel free to whip something up." Jack was floored. "Wait, she actually said she's counting on me?" The kids were bug-eyed. Wait, we're really allowed to eat. Ciela tried to smile, hoping to ease the tension, but she quickly realized with a sigh that it totally backfired. In the carriage, she thought with worry and sadness, I never expected Ren to get sick today. Hard to believe that little guy's 10 years old, the director said, her voice heavy with regret. I feel terrible. She figured Ren must have been feeling rough since this morning, but she hid it, scared of getting chewed out. The doc checked Ren over and said she's running a high fever, and if we'd waited any longer, things could have gotten real bad. He said she'll be fine after some good rest, and the director thanked him. Then, she sat by Ren's bed, worried. Noticing the girl looked even thinner because she was sick, she sadly realized it wasn't just Ren. All the kids were way too skinny for their age. The heroine decided that when they got back, she was going to feed those kids some real nutritious food. Then it hit her! If Ren's 10 now, then maybe the poor kids already got certain developments. She was relieved to see that the scar on her thigh, the one mentioned in the book, wasn't there yet. The girl thought that if Ren didn't have that scar, her relationship with the kids might not be completely ruined. Right then Ren, delirious, called out for her mom, begging her not to leave. Ren moaned again, pleading with her mommy not to abandon her and apologizing. Ciela quietly told the girl she didn't need to cry or be scared. Looking at the sick girl, she bitterly thought that Ren couldn't even say she was sick, and the other kids had even run off. The girl firmly concluded that this wasn't the time to worry about herself. The main thing was to help the kids. She resolved that she had to do everything to make sure the kids weren't hurting anymore, and to make sure they could grow up healthy and happy. The heroine promised herself she wouldn't let the kids suffer or be sad, and that she needed to make a plan for what to do next. Leaning over the sleeping Ren, she quietly wished her a good night's sleep, adding that she would protect her. Ren, half asleep, found it strange, noting that the headmistress wouldn't normally say things like that. But, to her own surprise, she somehow wanted to believe Miss Ciela. Ren hopefully thought she would have a nice dream. The next day, the headmistress asked Ren if she was sure she was feeling all right. She mentioned the doc said Ren's good to go home, but she's still worried sick. Ren piped up, all confident, saying she's seriously fine, and that she's just worried about Rudy and wants to get back to the orphanage ASAP. Then the headmistress suggested they head outside, since the carriage will be here any minute, and told Ren to let her know if she feels even a little off. Taking the girl's hand, she thought with a slight blush that holding kids' hands had become a real habit from her past life. Ren must have been super surprised, right? But, against Ciel's expectations, Ren squeezed the headmistress's hand tighter and quietly said it was time to go, which kinda threw the headmistress for a loop. The coachman rolled up and politely offered them a ride, and the headmistress, turning to Ren, smiled and told her to hop in. While they were riding, the headmistress showed Ren the bags and explained that they were all medicine. She rattled off what was inside: fever meds, something for her stomach, and some disinfectant stuff. Ciela made Ren promise to tell her from now on if he ever felt sick. She told herself firmly that she had to do everything she could to make sure what happened yesterday never happened again. But she noted with annoyance that all she knew right now was the kids' ages. Ren and Clone were 10, Rudy was 7, and Jack was 14. In the book, these four were the main characters from the orphanage. Then her thoughts switched to the girl with short hair. The protagonist asked herself, puzzled, who this kid was. At that moment, Ren, stumbling a little, said she didn't know if the director would get mad at what she was about to say. But she thinks the director has changed. She added that the director wouldn't have taken her to the hospital before, or bought her medicine, or been so nice and kind in general. The director, listening to her, thought that Ren must still be afraid of her, but had still mustered the courage to speak up. The protagonist confessed to Ren that she wanted to change. She understands that she hurt the children a lot before, but she doesn't know how to heal these wounds, and she asked the guys to tell her from now on if they get sick. She also said she wants them to be able to tell her straight up when they're hungry. Ciela declared that's the kind of guardian she wants to be. When they arrived, the headmistress thanked the coachman for his help, saying he'd been through a lot. The guy humbly replied, "Nah, it was nothing," and told them to call him again if they needed a ride. Then the coachman, looking a little embarrassed, added that he was also really sorry. He started gushing about Miss Ciela, saying he'd never seen a woman as beautiful as her before, and confessed that he kinda lost it for a sec and messed up. She figured he was talking about how he was staring at her when they first met. The coachman kept apologizing, saying that if he offended her, he was truly sorry and asked for her forgiveness. The headmistress said it was okay and advised him to be more careful next time. Back at the orphanage, the kids swarmed them, relieved. Clan shouted, "Thank God!" The boy ran up first, asking Ren anxiously if she was okay and if she was still hurting. Ren told him she got a great night's sleep at the hospital, so she wasn't hurting anymore. Then Rudy happily called out to her sis. Ren asked her if she'd been crying because she was gone. Rudy said she hadn't cried. Watching all this, the headmistress remembered their backstory. Ren and Clone were abandoned in front of the cathedral on the same day, and they'd been together ever since. Naturally, their bond grew strong. But it was Ren who took in Rudy, who was dying in the slums. After the split with Clone, it was just the two of them. To protect Ren, Rudy trained in swordsmanship under a master of the cat tribe and became a gladiator. There was a time when Ren remembered the Ciela orphanage and tearfully apologized to Rudy. She said she was sorry she took her from one bad situation into something even worse. Rudy's like, "If Ren's with me, anywhere's paradise," and tells his sister to dry her eyes. The head honcho figures Ren's bond with Rudy might even be tighter than with Clone. And just then, Jack's all, "Thank goodness, Ren," like he dodged a bullet. The head thought, with no grown-ups around, these kids stayed safe only 'cause of Jack. Right then, Jack tells Clone to lay off Ren, 'cause she's still recovering. Clone starts arguing he wasn't bothering her, but the head thinks Jack's hiding some serious hostility. Unlike Clone, who wears it on his sleeve, Jack worries her way more, 'cause you gotta watch out for the quiet ones. Knowing Jack, he'll doubt her till the bitter end. It's just how he was raised. Then, the girl's thoughts drifted to another girl, one they never talked about in the book. Back to business, the head tells Ren to go inside and chill, and asks Jack to pop into her office for a sec. In the office, Jack's surprised, asking why it looks so much emptier than before. The director said she put the cocoa, snacks, and everything else in the kitchen, so he can grab a bite whenever he wants. Then she offered Jack a taste of the cocoa and asked if he liked it. Jack replied that he thought Rudy would really dig it, so the director asked him to make it for the kids. She explained that if she made it, they wouldn't be able to just chill and enjoy it. After that, Jack just cut to the chase and asked why she called him in. The director started explaining that she'd recently realized she doesn't know squat about the people living at the orphanage. She admitted she'd been way too distant this whole time and caused them a lot of heartache. Ciela said she doesn't think her efforts will magically heal those wounds, but she still wants to build a better future. The girl clarified that, at the very least, she wants to make it so they can think of this place as their safe haven. She asked Jack if he could give her a shot, and after making her request, the director figured she'd said all she could. If Jack chickens out now, she'll have to start from scratch. Knowing nothing about the kids, Jack was honest, saying he doesn't think the director's really changed, but he doesn't want to give up hope that the kids can be happy. Listening, the director sadly thought that Jack was always ready to put aside his own wants and worries for the sake of others' happiness. She also bitterly noted that he's a kid who's never really going to get to grow up. Jack agreed to help, saying he'd write down everything he knows about the kids in a notebook and give it to her. The director hopefully thought that maybe she could change not only her future, but his too. She pointed him to the bags and said there were clothes and other stuff inside, and asked him to hand them out to the other kids. Left alone, the director wearily thought about how exhausted she was. The girl wondered when the last time she even ate was, and how long she'd been running around. She didn't sleep all night taking care of Ren, and she still needs to check out the orphanage and figure out what needs fixing and unpack all the bags. The girl figured she'd catch a quick nap, just a couple of minutes, but she woke up totally freaked out. She was like, "What time is it?" And then remembered she'd gotten back around lunchtime. A wave of dread washed over her as she blurted out, "No way I slept through the whole day, did I?" Noticing the blanket on her, she was shocked to realize it was Ren's. She wondered, touched, and surprised. When did that kid even bring this and tuck me in? Glancing out the window, she thought, "Who's that dude standing outside the gate?" Suddenly, loud yelling erupted from outside. Some guy was screaming his head off, demanding they open the gate, yelling for the director, and calling the kids' names. Jack calmly told him they couldn't open the gate without the director's okay. That just made the stranger even angrier, and he started yelling threats and asking if they even knew who he was. Just then, the headmistress showed up and was like, "What in the world is going on here?" Ciela threw a blanket over Ren's shoulders, telling her she needed to rest up and stay warm because she wasn't fully recovered yet. The girl also pointed out that the kids had changed into new clothes, and they looked way cuter than she thought they would. The dude saw the headmistress and started yelling, accusing her of disrespect, saying she couldn't treat him like that. The headmistress sized him up, figuring he was an aristocrat from the crest, and wondered to herself what he was doing at the orphanage. The aristocrat ordered Ciela to let him in right now, saying he'd deal with these rude little brats first. Right then, Jack called out to Clone, suggesting they get out of there. He said the headmistress would open the gates soon anyway, but the headmistress flat out refused the aristocrat, and the guy, shocked and furious, asked her to repeat herself. The director just coldly told him he heard right. The kids watched it all go down, whispering to each other. One of them even wondered if that was really their director. Meanwhile, the rich guy was still losing it, yelling that the director shouldn't act that way, and demanding she remember how much the orphanage owed him. Listening to him, the director figured out why he was acting so high and mighty. He was here to collect. She also noticed the kids weren't even fazed, which meant he'd been here before, always yelling and trying to intimidate them. Ciela turned to Jack and told him to get all the kids inside, said they could grab a snack, but they had to stay inside. Jack looked a little uneasy, but he quickly told the kids to follow him. Alone with the rich guy, the director politely, but firmly, asked him to try and understand her position. The girl said she still couldn't let in someone who looked so threatening, and the aristocrat was all, "That's outrageous!" The director thought to herself that if Ciela really owed him money, making a scene wasn't going to help. The main character let the grumpy, arrogant aristocrat in and invited him to her office. They exchanged scornful looks, and the uninvited guest asked if Miss Ciela wasn't going to offer him any tea. The heroine responded with a question of her own, asking why she should offer him tea. After that, the man stated that the director owed him 1,000 gold pieces. As it turned out, the man was Baron Clark. The director thought she'd always wondered how Ciela afforded so many luxuries without the Empire's support. Now the answer was clear. It was a loan shark with insane interest rates. She realized with horror that 1,000 gold pieces was a fortune, but something about the situation seemed off. The heroine wondered why he'd loaned her such a huge amount, and why he trusted Ciela so much. Seeing her silence, the Baron sneered, saying he knew she'd deny it, and shoved the contract in her face. The director read the terms. Ciela Peyront was borrowing 1,000 gold from Baron Clark. If the debt wasn't repaid by September 5th, 767, she'd have to fulfill a request from the Baron. The contract was signed and sealed by both parties. It was a completely legit loan agreement. And now it hit the heroine. He never expected Ciela to repay the debt. He was after something else entirely. The Baron challenged her, asking if she had anything to say now. The director quickly ran the numbers in her head. After selling her dresses and jewelry and buying the bare necessities, she had 1,108 gold left. If she repaid the debt, she'd only have 108 gold left. That wouldn't cover the repairs, not to mention living expenses for the next few months. The Baron said she didn't need to worry, she could just not pay the debt. He started explaining that, you see, he didn't have an heir, and at his age, he was completely alone. The guy admitted he wants to pass on his title to his kid someday, so he hatched a plan. He wants to adopt a child. At the end of his speech, the Baron asked the director if she understood what he was getting at. That evening, the main character was mulling over the Baron's words, wondering if anything like this happened in the original story. Meanwhile, she started studying the notebook Jack left behind. It had short profiles of the kids. Clone's 10 years old, got a cheerful and proud personality, his favorite person is Ren, and his favorite food is oatmeal. Ren's 10, she's Clone's best friend and sister. Rudy just adores her, and her favorite food is oatmeal. Reading about their favorite food, the heroine was surprised to see that oatmeal isn't exactly what kids usually like. Little Rudy's 7 years old. She's the youngest, but she's advanced, rarely cries, sometimes fights Clone for Ren's attention, and her favorite food is soup. Jack's 14 years old, he's the oldest. The main character noticed how typical of Jack it was to write only a single sentence about it. Then she moved on to the last entry, about an unknown kid who brought food to the director's room. It was 10-year-old Eddie, a new girl at the orphanage. The girl felt relieved that things were starting to make sense, but she wondered why Eddie wasn't even mentioned in the book. In Ren's flashback, there was a line saying Eddie was adopted into a Baron's family. Just then, someone timidly knocked on the door and called out to the director. It was Eddie. quietly asking if she could come in. The director invited her in and offered her some cocoa. Eddie thanked her and said it was even better than what Jack made. The director asked her what was wrong and wondered why the girl had come to the director's office so late. Eddie, stammering, admitted that she'd actually overheard the director's conversation with the Baron. She made a point of saying she wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Then she said she overheard the Baron wants to adopt a kid and that a girl would work too. Getting more and more worked up, all shaky and stammering, the girl said that's why she wanted to say something. The headmistress calmed Eddie down, said it was okay, and asked if she was trying to say she wanted to join the Baron's family. Eddie started apologizing, saying someone like her even daring to suggest something like that. The headmistress started explaining that if she gets adopted by an aristocratic family, at least Eddie will be able to live comfortably. Hearing that, a silent question froze on Eddie's face, and hope flickered in her eyes. But she was suspicious about Baron Clark's house. She assured Eddie she had nothing to worry about, and that it wasn't because she was lacking in any way. Ciela said she just couldn't send her or anyone else away. Eddie asked, confused, why the headmistress didn't want them to leave. The headmistress said that if Eddie really wanted to transfer somewhere else, and it was a good place, she'd let her go. The girl firmly added that if the place wasn't good, she wouldn't agree under any circumstances. Ciela explained that Eddie and the other kids were the ones she was supposed to protect. Then she gently told Eddie to go to bed, and the girl asked if it really wasn't possible. Eddie wanted to say something else, but abruptly stopped herself, apologizing as she left for bothering Miss Ciela so late. Clearly holding something back, the girl quickly ran out of the office. Alone, the heroine sadly thought that Eddie looked so upset. It was breaking her heart. She remembered that in the original story, there was a scene where an adult Wren regretfully recalled her childhood. It said that Eddie was adopted by a baron's family, and then it said that terrible news soon followed. It turned out that Eddie passed away due to the baron's unspeakable actions. This memory ended with Wren wondering what would have happened if the orphanage kids had paid more attention back then. With a heavy heart, the director asked herself how she could give Eddie away, knowing all this. She analyzed the baron's words. He spoke convincingly about a lonely old age and having no heir. But then he added the condition that it absolutely had to be a girl. She sadly realized that in the original story, Eddie begged to be adopted, just like she is now. The original Ciela, unable to pay her debt, gave the girl away without a second thought. Soon after the adoption, Eddie was found dead, though the kids at the orphanage found out much later. The reason Eddie wanted to be adopted so badly wasn't about climbing the social ladder. It was all because of the feeling of being left out among the other kids. Eddie, who had only recently arrived at the orphanage, couldn't fit in with the group of kids who had lived there for years. The other kids were totally oblivious, just focused on staying alive. The heroine had to admit, she understood why Eddie was upset by what she'd said. But knowing what she knows, she can't just send her to her doom. The girl thought hopefully that it wasn't too late, and Eddie just needed a chance to connect with the other kids. The next morning, the Baron came back and asked the director if she'd chosen a child. He announced he liked the girl with the pink hair, and added that the youngest one would do too. Listening to him, the heroine thought furiously that this piece of garbage thought the kids were just some kind of merchandise. Instead of answering, she slammed a bag with 1,000 gold on the table and ordered him to take it and get the hell out of her orphanage. The Baron, stunned and furious, asked what "get the hell out" meant, outraged at the disrespect. The director said, cold as ice, that they weren't bound by any obligation anymore, so why should she show him any respect? She stated flatly that this place had always been under her thumb, and she'd decide how to treat guests, not him. The Baron asked, with a nasty edge, where she got that kind of money. He told her she better think things through, because if she borrowed from the wrong people, she'd be in deep trouble. The Baron, furious at being treated like that, yelled, asking how she dared talk to him like that, and the director just commented on how loud he was. She said if he came for the cash, he could take it and leave, and asked why he was still running his mouth. Ciela explained coolly that if you looked at it objectively, their titles were pretty much on the same level. She added that even a fallen aristocrat remains an aristocrat until the title's sold off. Then the heroine got insistent, demanding he get out of there, saying it was almost lunchtime and she had kids to feed. She stated firmly that they had nothing left to talk about, so he should leave the loan documents and get lost. Since she doesn't want to see him anymore, she demanded he hand over the contract too. The Baron tossed the paper on the floor, disgusted. As he left, the Baron snarled that Ciela Perunt would live to regret this. Once the Baron was finally gone, the main character thought with pride and relief that she'd settled all her debts. Then she decided she really needed to get lunch ready for the kids. Meanwhile, that wacky clone burst into the girls' bedroom, complaining that the headmistress was acting totally sus. He confessed that Miss Ciela had just told him the kids needed to wait while she cooked them lunch. Clone wondered if she was going to poison the food, then answered his own question, saying that Witch definitely would. Jack told Clone to stop saying crazy stuff. Clone pointed out that even so, it was super weird that she'd suddenly started cooking for them. Jack said the boss ladies really changed lately, buying them medicine, toys, even clothes. Ren chimed in, saying maybe Miss Ciela really has turned over a new leaf. The girl remembered faking sleep in the hospital, hearing everything, and Miss Ciela promised to protect her. Ren thought it sounded genuine, noting the difference in her actions and the way she spoke. Ren confessed she wants to believe Miss Ciela, even a little, but Clone immediately shot that down. He reminded them that this witch would curse Rudy if he even sniffled, while she stuffed her face with greasy food. The kid insisted, all fired up, that someone like that doesn't just change overnight. Then Clone turned to Eddie and asked what she thought about all this. The girl was quiet for a long time, just kind of mumbling. Finally, Eddie stammered out that Clone's got a point, but Ren's not wrong either, you know? This set Clone off like a powder keg, demanding to know who was right and who was dead wrong. He rolled his eyes and called the shy girl a real drag. Ren nudged him lightly with her elbow, telling him to cut the crap. Eddie pointed out that, compared to before, things have changed. The headmaster doesn't fly off the handle and get physical anymore. But the big question mark is whether Miss Ciela has really changed, like Ren claims. Eddie remembered how the headmaster used to talk to them like they were just a pain in the neck. But lately, she has been nice. Eddie concluded that she thinks Ren's right. She clarified that she can't be 100% sure, but she really does think the headmaster's changed. Then Eddie started stammering again and mumbled an apology to Clone. Clone asked what she was apologizing for. She just gave her opinion. He told her to stop overthinking and sweating the small stuff, because when she shrinks down like that, it can look like he's messing with her. Then Ren asked if it was true he'd never mess with anyone, and Clone, surprised, was like, "What are you even talking about?" Ren laughed and said she was just kidding. Meanwhile, the main girl was making lunch for the kids. The headmistress tasted her cooking and decided it was good. She announced that the food was ready and told everyone to come eat. Hearing that, the kids froze, shocked that Miss Ciela was actually cooking. Clone gave the order. "We gotta check if she put anything extra in the food." Jack said they needed to hurry and get down there. Ren suggested Eddie go with her, and feeling the warmth of the pink-haired girl's hands, Eddie agreed. When they walked in, the headmistress told them to come in and said that today the kids were having a full-course meal, telling them to take their seats. Rudy mumbled that it smelled good. Clone asked, surprised, what a full-course meal even meant for kids. Okay, so the headmistress started laying out the lunch plan. Clone and Rudy get meat patties and soup. Ren and Eddie are having fried rice for lunch, and Jack gets a mousse. It smelled incredible. The kids couldn't believe they were actually allowed to eat this stuff. They were whispering about how this kind of food is usually only for the super rich, like total high society types. The headmistress was thinking she didn't want their lives to be dictated by social class, power, or a fat bank account. She wanted them to be able to enjoy a good meal or appreciate something beautiful. That's the kind of people she wants to help them become. She noticed the kids had probably never used a knife before. They were all watching her instead of eating. And what's more, they were worried if the food was even safe to eat. Then the heroine said she'd forgotten something and announced she'd be in the director's office. Secretly, she was hoping they could finally eat in peace. As she left, she noted with slight disappointment that the first try is always a flop. She decided that since it went down like that, she'd keep cooking for them often, so the food wouldn't seem so weird. The girl planned to make more varied and special dishes, but then she remembered with regret that she was broke. She sadly thought she never would have guessed she'd lose $1,000 in gold to debts in a heartbeat. She figured she only had a measly 108 gold left now. Even if she does all the repairs on the orphanage herself, she still needs materials. She calculated that'll cost 3 gold alone, not counting living expenses. And with the cost of the kids' education and food, that money'll last 6 months, tops. The heroine came to the grim realization that even if they managed to survive, life wouldn't be a walk in the park. More like a miserable, dirt-poor existence. Bottom line, the main character admitted she desperately needed some backing. The original Sienna screwed things up, and the Imperial support dried up ages ago. The heroine sadly noted that even a little help from anyone would be a godsend. Otherwise, the orphanage would quickly fall apart. So she figured she needed to find a steady, reliable source of funding. The girl remembered she had someone in mind, because according to the original story, this was the guy who eventually adopted Clone. It was the man who would one day make the boy emperor. The heroine decided to bet on him, knowing the huge risk that if the plan failed, she could pay the ultimate price. But if it all worked out, he'd be the most rock-solid backer anyone could ask for. So, that man, the orphanage's potential benefactor, read the main character's letter. He made a point of saying that girl's got guts. Then, he ordered his right-hand man to dig up everything on Ciel Perunt and bring her to him. A little while later, a fancy-ass carriage pulled up to the orphanage, and Miss Ciel was just racking her brain about what to make for dinner. The stranger introduced himself as Rick Henneman, aide to His Grace, Duke Creeman. He announced he was there to deliver His Grace's reply to her. The director was surprised, thinking she'd only sent the letter yesterday and didn't expect him to send a guy with a response so fast. She also figured he was playing it safe in case she tried any funny business, since he asked her to read the reply and give an answer right away. The kids were seriously bugged that this dude delivered the letter, but was still hanging around for some reason. After reading the letter, she saw that Duke Antrich Creeman wanted to talk to her in person. He's asking her to take the carriage he sent and come to him right away. Rick Henneman wanted to know what her answer was. The director said she had no reason to refuse. In fact, she admitted to herself she was hoping for this. He told her to get in the carriage, but she asked him to wait a sec. Rick's face was a silent question mark, and she told him there was something he needed to do. She asked if all the kids remembered they weren't allowed outside or to touch dangerous stuff. Miss Ciela announced she'd made sandwiches so the kids could eat if they got hungry, and added that they shouldn't eat too much cold food, or they might get a tummy ache. She warned them that if a stranger asked them to open the door, they absolutely couldn't let him in. And she was thinking about what else to say. But Clone cut the director off, pissed that they already got the message. Enough with the instructions. The heroine was surprised that the kids were showing their feelings way more openly around her. Did that mean they were getting more comfortable with her? Ciela remembered that the kids went missing during her first outing, so she was super worried it could happen again. The director assured the kids it wouldn't take long and promised to hit the market on the way back. She asked Clone if there was anything he wanted to eat. The boy hesitated for a long time, then mumbled something quietly and unclearly. When they asked him to repeat what he said, he shouted loudly and firmly that he wanted cutlets. Then, stammering, he added that he wanted to try a kid's meal, or whatever it's called. The girl beamed and asked if he liked the cutlets she made that much. The boy vehemently denied it, insisting that wasn't it at all. It's just that he'd never had food like that before. He swore up and down it wasn't about the taste, just plain curiosity. But the heroine thought it was super cute. Then the girl went around asking the other kids the same thing. Rudy piped up all excited, saying she wanted whatever Jack was having. Miss Ciela pointed out she was talking about Omarishi and wondered what Ren and Eddie would like to try. Eddie got totally flustered and couldn't bring herself to answer. That's when Ren jumped in to help her out of the awkwardness, suggesting they get fried rice together again. Eddie asked, all hopeful, if they really could. They told her of course they could, and asked if she wanted anything else. Eddie, stumbling over her words a little, said no thanks. She just really liked the fried rice. The heroine used to think Eddie and the other kids would need some help warming up to each other. She wondered when they'd gotten so close. But life at the orphanage was getting a little easier. But seeing how fast things were changing, it seems like she underestimated the kids. Clone was asking Ren if the fried rice was good. Then the kid announced he wanted to try fried rice next time, while the main character's thoughts switched to Jack. He was standing away from the others, and had been looking worried ever since the Duke's carriage arrived. He probably thought the Creeman house was connected to that whole thing. Then Miss Ciela called out to him and told him not to worry, promising that no matter what happened, she'd protect him. She thought to herself that she understood that those words must have been unexpected for the kid, but that's exactly what she wanted to say to calm him down. Then Miss Ciela asked Jack what he wanted to eat. He was quiet for a moment, and then shyly and quietly answered, "Oh, Maurice." Ciela said okay and promised to make it when they got back. So Miss Ciela asked him to keep an eye on the rest of the guys while she was gone. All right, the carriage has arrived at its destination. The girl stepped out of the carriage and was blown away by what she saw. The garden was so huge, you couldn't even see the end of it, and it was beautifully designed. The estate, majestic and secluded, looked like some old-school castle. Rick asked Ciela to follow him, offering to escort her to the master. The protagonist figured she was finally going to meet him. The reason she picked the Duke as a sponsor wasn't just because his family was the only one standing up to the imperial family, and it wasn't just because he was going to make Clone the new emperor. Ciela figured there was nothing wrong with getting on his good side ahead of time, because if anything goes down, he can protect their orphanage, as long as they keep things friendly. The girl figured she'd use info from the original story to win him over. The servant announced to his lord that he'd brought Ciela Perunt from Sylvia's orphanage. Before her stood Duke Dietrich Kremen, known as the most ruthless and most handsome man in the Empire. She wondered if it was even legal for a side character, not the main one, to be this gorgeous. He didn't look like a guy who'd butcher his enemies on the battlefield. The Duke started talking, saying he was curious who had the nerve to send him a letter like that, and he remarked that she looked a lot more ordinary than he'd expected. She thought back that he looked pretty extraordinary himself, with his amazing hair and otherworldly voice. The heroine then asked if he was disappointed that she didn't live up to his expectations. Ignoring her question, Dietrich offered her a seat and suggested they talk. The heroine's eyes met the Duke's. She wondered, surprised, what was going on, and if this was some kind of mind game. She remembered all the characters she'd dealt with in her past life. Something like this wasn't going to intimidate her. The Duke asked her what the heck she meant by what she wrote in the letter she sent. He read a passage from the letter, claiming she knew the solution to the problem that troubled him most, and offered to write back if he wanted to know. He demanded she tell him what was currently bothering him the most and how to fix it. And most importantly, how did she even find out about it? The heroine stated that before giving an answer, she had one condition. To the Duke's question of what her condition was, she asked him to become a sponsor for their orphanage. Dietrich asked, skeptical, if she was really pulling this stunt just to get sponsorship money. She explained that for him, it was pocket change, but for the orphanage kids, it was a matter of life and death. Without that money, the kids would starve and wouldn't get medical care when they needed it. With tears in her eyes, she added that she used to be one of those kids herself. Seeing how sincere she was, Dietrich apologized, admitting he'd spoken too harshly, and decided to rephrase the question. He asked why she was trying to get help specifically from him, when she could go to the emperor or other nobles. She replied that it was because he, the Duke, was the strongest and most righteous person she knew. His lordship wondered why she thought that. The heroine responded that she just had a feeling, adding that she might not look like it, but she was a good judge of character. Meanwhile, she thought to herself that she couldn't exactly admit she'd read about it in a book. The Duke asked, all suspicious, if she was messing with him. She shot back a "no way," saying she'd risked everything just to get here. So, he finally agreed to listen, asking her to lay out the problem that was eating him up inside. She started explaining that the issue was all about maritime trade. The main character flashed back to a scene in the book where the Duke called Clone over. He told his son that the royal family had seized total control of the seas. Because of that, the maritime trade that kept their family afloat had become a total nightmare. He added that if they'd locked down the trade routes beforehand, things wouldn't have gone south like this. Ciela confidently clarified that they were talking about maritime trade with the Western Kingdom. For a long time, the Kremen ducal house and the royal family had a mutually beneficial thing going. The Duke's house became the sword of the imperial family, and in return, the imperial family protected them. But that perfect relationship was shattered by the current emperor, who offed his own brother to seize the throne. The imperial family and the Kremen dukedom started going at each other's throats. The Kingdom of Weston, shrouded in secrecy for ages because of their isolationist policies, finally opened its doors. The imperial family and the Kremen dukedom, already deep into trade, immediately jumped at the chance to establish ties with Weston. However, the heroine pointed out a major snag. The seas near the Kingdom of Weston are swarming with pirates. They can't just start a reckless brawl in foreign waters, and they can't ignore the whirlpools surrounding the kingdom's coast. On top of that, the Kingdom of Weston announced they'll only trade with one partner. So, the imperial family and the Kremen dukedom, locked in a silent battle, are scrambling to find a safe trade route. She thought to herself with satisfaction that it was just a hunch, but it looks like she nailed it. The Duke, admitting she'd nailed the problem, asked if she had a solution for the Western Kingdom trade issue. The girl asked for a map and a pen, then pointed out he still hadn't answered her question. And again, she asked, would he sponsor their orphanage? Dietrich asked, what gave her the nerve to act so recklessly? He wondered if she thought he was trying to squeeze information out of her. She thought to herself that she'd already kicked the bucket once, so she was willing to bet her life where she had a fighting chance. She was sure he'd already dug up dirt on her and knew she wasn't exactly someone to write home about. But still, Ciela added, she was confident his lordship wouldn't resort to those kinds of tactics. The girl emphasized that if she was giving something, she needed something in return, and asked what he thought about that. The Duke remarked that she was acting like she knew him well, and Rick thought the whole situation was messed up. He figured if Miss Ciel heard the rumors about Duke Kramen, the guy everyone's terrified of, she'd be shaking in her boots. They called his lordship the ice-cold king of the battlefield, showing zero mercy to his enemies. He was respected, sure, but he was also feared like hell. People whispered he might just turn his sword on his own people one day. They called him a monster, cold as ice, never shedding a tear. The Duke was certain she had to have heard all this messed up stuff. But the heroine shot back, saying she knew his lordship wasn't the monster the rumors made him out to be. Dietrich asked her what she'd do if he turned down her offer. Without even a blink, she said she'd leave his estate and head straight for the imperial palace. The guy realized it wasn't just a bluff. She knew all about the connection between the Kramen dukedom and the imperial family. This just piled another problem on his plate, and Dietrich wondered just how much this girl actually knew. Dietrich eventually agreed, but with conditions. He demanded that if the deal went through, she couldn't breathe a word about this conversation, or any of the info she gave him. Ciela said she accepted his terms. Only then did the Duke announce that he accepted her offer. The girl was over the moon that the orphanage was going to get funding from Duke Kramen. Then, she formally asked him to support their orphanage until all the kids were able to make it on their own. If the information she provided turned out to be true, Ciela wanted a written promise of support from him. The girl also insisted that he not ask her about her source, and if the information turned out to be a bust, then he could do whatever he wanted. The Duke was surprised by the modesty of her request and asked if that was really all she wanted. The heroine confirmed it, adding she didn't need to keep the info a secret. Plus, if 5 kids can live happily, that's enough for her. Dietrich just said he understood. He was thinking she was going pretty far for just a guardian, and figured she was one strange lady. The Duke remarked that a lot of parents are downright awful, even to their own kids. Meanwhile, the heroine was racking her brain, remembering what she'd read. Eternal Scar had a whole world guidebook. Back then, she was blown away by the author's attention to detail, and studied that thing for ages. The map showed the routes of key players, locations of important buildings, even trade routes. She needed to recall what was in it and make some notes on the map. After all, she'd read it carefully. After a while, Ciela stated that she'd given him all the information she had. The Duke, studying the map, could hardly believe even pirate hotspots and coastal whirlpools were marked. Dietrich figured if all this was legit, once the Duke's business took off, even the Emperor wouldn't mess with them. The girl suggested that if the Duke didn't trust her, he could check out the route first and hold off on funding the orphanage until then. The young man agreed and told them to bring the seal. They brought him the support contract stamped with the Duke Kramen seal, which Dietrich handed to our girl. He stated that this was what she wanted, and she gratefully accepted the document. Then she said she'd bothered him enough for one day, and since the kids were waiting, she said goodbye and got ready to leave. As she left, the Duke declared that if the info was true, he'd reward her like she was his savior. The girl proudly thought that being called the Duke's savior made her stand up a little straighter. Days at the orphanage went by as usual. The kids played, and Miss Ciela took care of things around the place. She was happy to see the place finally looking like a real home for raising kids. In the past month, she'd fixed everything she could, patched up the ceiling, and worked on the outside walls. She swapped out the old table and chairs, put down a tablecloth, and finally replaced that busted window. Now, as far as she was concerned, everything was just perfect. She was admiring the new window when she suddenly noticed Clone in the reflection, way too high up on the jungle gym. Ren told Clone he was climbing too high. Eddie chimed in, saying it was too dangerous, and asking if he was even allowed to climb all the way to the top. Clone, already up there, tried to calm everyone down, saying he had a good grip and everything was fine. But Miss Ciela said it was super dangerous and started worrying he might fall. Everyone started pressuring him to come down right now, and he finally agreed, though he wasn't thrilled about it. The heroine thought to herself that Clone just couldn't help himself, always climbing up there. Rudy admitted she kinda wanted to climb to the top too, and for a sec, Miss Ciela got distracted looking for Jack. She figured he was probably inside reading, when suddenly, someone screamed that the headmistress had fallen. Everyone started yelling in alarm, and Clone's fingers slipped. The kid was going down! Next thing you know, Clone was safe in the headmistress's arms. The kids gasped, and the heroine asked if Clone was hurt. The boy looked totally stunned, but seemed okay physically, so everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The heroine reminded Clone she told him not to climb so high. It was dangerous. He apologized, looking embarrassed. She made a mental note that this was the first time Clone had ever apologized to her. She said it was good he wasn't hurt, but told him not to do anything dangerous again, and asked if he understood. He confirmed, kinda sheepish. Then she announced that playtime was great, but it was time to eat, and ordered everyone inside to wash their hands. She was thinking how kids that age just run around everywhere. She realized she couldn't stop them from playing just because they might get hurt, and that she needed to watch over them. Just then, she tried to get up and yelped in pain. But then she calmed herself, figuring as long as Clone was okay, it was nothing. She decided she'd better go make lunch, and she could put on a bandage later. Finally, the repairs inside and outside the orphanage were finished. The kids were gradually getting used to the new atmosphere and bonding with each other. The headmistress mentioned that the kids had gotten much closer to her too, even though it wasn't easy getting their relationship to this point. Ciela remembered a conversation during lunch a few weeks back. She suggested the kids open up and chat. The heroine decided to go first, saying they could talk about anything, like how she wanted Clone to stop getting hurt all the time. Rudy laughed and pointed out he's always got fresh scrapes, and Jack said he was happy with how things were going for them now. Actually, Eddie's the one who's changed the most out of all the kids, and when it was her turn to speak, she confessed something. Since Eddie was the last one to arrive at the orphanage, she figured it'd be tough to bond with everyone. But she promised to try to be brave and connect with the others little by little. Eddie asked them not to push her away. Clone suddenly shouted that they already considered Eddie part of their family, and asked if she didn't feel the same way. Eddie, tearing up at those words, asked if that was really true. And Clone, getting embarrassed, started begging her to stop crying. The headmistress admitted to herself that she had no idea what to do when Eddie burst into tears. In her head, she realized the whole month had been nothing but flashbacks like this. The news she'd been waiting for was finally spreading across the empire. She hoped they'd start getting aid next month. That morning, Duke Crayman's merchant ship arrived at port. The papers were all about his successful trade with the Western Kingdom. People on the street were saying the monster Duke wasn't just good at war, but at business too. Word was, at this rate, nobody could stop Duke Crayman, and that news really shook up the Emperor. His Majesty, Yeoman Fries, always stood out from his brothers, even as a kid. But because of his mother's low birth, he could never become heir. But he ended up taking out his brother and seizing the throne anyway. That's when his cruel and heartless side really came out. It was so terrifying that even 10 years later, nobody dared to cross him, and nobody but the Crayman family had the guts to stand up to him. The Emperor went ballistic when he found out Duke Crayman snagged the Western trade rights first. He was screaming about how his advisors just sat on their butts watching it happen, not even knowing how the Duke reached the kingdom. The Emperor was asking, is this even acceptable? He was fuming that, is the Emperor of this whole damn empire, would have to pay to use that route. His Majesty declared he couldn't stand for it, and demanded to know how the Duke even managed to open that trade route in the first place. The courtiers, shaking in their boots, agreed with him, saying he was absolutely right. They said Duke Crayman's actions were a major slap in the face to the imperial family. The Emperor demanded an answer, asking if really no one knew a damn thing about it. The advisors noted that the Emperor always gets especially ticked off when Duke Crayman's involved. The Emperor, pissed, demanded they spit it out already, and they reported that, rumor has it, it was the orphanage director. The Emperor asked, skeptical, how a guy like that could wind up on the Duke's estate. They explained that, while it wasn't confirmed yet, this guy managed to meet the Duke in person. And soon after that, the Duke sent people to open up a trade route. The Emperor ordered them to investigate it and send someone to that orphanage. The emperor called out his advisors for always just believing what's right in front of them and ignoring people of lower status, making the same mistake all over again. The advisors asked what he meant. The emperor wondered how a simple orphanage director would know about a trade route, but after thinking it over, he agreed that if the director was somehow connected to the duke, he should be watched. Then he ordered them to summon a messenger immediately, saying he wanted to send a gift to this so-called orphanage director. Another ship was getting ready to leave from the docks. Rick was saying, all worried, that once His Grace gets to the estate, they're gonna be swamped. The Duke told his guy to handle anything urgent he could take care of himself. He added that he needed to swing by somewhere first. Meanwhile, our girl was slaving over those kids' portions, trying to make them look as tasty as possible. She chirped, saying she just had to put on the finishing touches. Then she called the kids over to sit down, and they totally flipped out when they saw the omaris. They thanked her for the food, and she told them to dig in, but take it easy. She watched them eat, all warm and fuzzy inside. And she thought Jack was probably hungry too, but he still hadn't put down that book. After lunch, Jack was doing his usual thing, reading in his room. She thought to herself that the kid was always on edge, like he could bolt any second. The heroine realized Jack was the only one she hadn't really connected with in a whole month. It wasn't like he was completely shutting her out, just keeping his distance. The girl asked him if he'd be interested in getting some proper lessons. She explained that a good education in this world is worth way more than you'd think. Even though they weren't rich, if it helped the kids down the line, it was worth a shot. Jack was surprised and asked if that was even possible. He started wondering if Miss Cielo was trying to tell him something, but just then, someone knocked at the gate. The girl was surprised, wondering who it could be, and hurried to greet the visitor. She told Jack they'd get back to this conversation later. A stranger in a uniform asked the girl who peeked out if she was the director of Sylvia's shelter. Sylvia Peyrunt? She confirmed it, then asked who he was. Spotting the crest on his shoulder, she knew instantly who he was. No doubt about it. The messenger introduced himself, saying he was there to deliver a decree from His Majesty. He added that she probably never imagined he'd come here in person. Ciela replied that she didn't know what orders he'd received, but emphasized it was just a regular orphanage. He said he understood, but would still like to talk inside. The girl politely refused, explaining that the kids would be freaked out by a nobleman in full regalia. The messenger sighed, clearly annoyed, but resigned himself to it. Then he informed her that His Majesty had decided to financially support her orphanage. The heroine was in shock. The envoy announced a special sponsorship, emphasizing that direct support from the imperial family was extremely rare. He kept saying it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Seriously, the amount alone was more than any other sponsor would give. She was suspicious, asking why the emperor would suddenly decide to sponsor her orphanage. She pointed out the orphanage didn't meet the funding standards, and now it's getting special help out of nowhere. Ciela figured something was definitely fishy here. She politely declined, saying she appreciated His Majesty's kindness, but couldn't accept it without knowing why. The messenger blew a gasket at her refusal, yelling at her to get a grip and asking if she even knew what she was saying. The girl wondered to herself why he was pushing so hard, since she just turned down a donation. The messenger insisted nothing compared to the emperor's support. The amount would be bigger than any other sponsor. He added that with this money, she could easily pay off the debt to Baron Clark. Hearing this, she got wary. She asked how he knew that, and worried that maybe the royal family had been investigating her. But that wasn't in the original story. She figured it was because of her meeting with Duke Crayman. Despite the pressure, she firmly stated that she really appreciated the offer, but had to decline. She told him to leave. Suddenly, the messenger grabbed her, and with a threat, he asked if she really thought she could disobey the emperor's order and get away with it. Ciela asked sarcastically if this was how the royal family got what they wanted, by strong-arming people. She warned that if the messenger didn't leave, she'd write to His Majesty, and explained that his behavior was rude and aggressive, leaving her no choice but to refuse the sponsorship. The messenger scoffed, saying the emperor wouldn't read a letter from some washed-up aristocrat. He warned her that if she made the emperor her enemy, no house would sponsor her. Suddenly, someone calmly said it didn't matter. They'd be fine even without the imperial family's support. Turns out, Duke Crayman had shown up at that very moment. The messenger, stunned, started babbling that even a duke couldn't ignore His Majesty's will. The duke pointed out that if you make the imperial family your enemy, no other family will sponsor you. Duke Cramen declared that his family would sponsor this orphanage, which meant the orphanage was under his protection and patronage. Furthermore, he added that he wouldn't allow anyone else to be its patron. He ordered the messenger to return and relay that to His Majesty, word for word. As he left, the messenger shouted in fury that he'd report the Duke's audacity to His Majesty. After the envoy left, the Duke turned to the orphanage director, apologizing for being late. Ciela took mental note of his appearance. His shirt wasn't even buttoned, and his sleeves were different lengths. She figured he'd rushed straight here without even stopping by his estate. The Duke noticed her staring and asked why she was looking at him like that, implying it was more important than his appearance. The girl apologized, flustered, explaining that he'd shown up so suddenly, and she was a little surprised. She thought he'd caught her checking him out. Then Ciela gratefully remembered that a minute ago, he'd said he'd sponsor their orphanage, so he'd kept his word. She politely invited him inside, saying that, while it was humble, she would offer him tea. Dietrich happily agreed, but added that the children were afraid of him. The heroine apologized if that made him uncomfortable, and explained that they were scared of aristocrats. As she led him down the hall to her office, the Duke noticed how warm and cozy it was. He commented on the great lighting, too. Like it was the perfect place for kids. She wondered what he was looking at, then realized he was staring at the ceiling. He added that it looked like she put a lot of work into it, and she thought sheepishly about the ceiling she'd fixed herself. That ceiling's practically held together with spit and glue, and she felt a wave of embarrassment. Politely replying that it was an honor to hear such words from His Grace, she invited him inside. Opening the door to her office, she inwardly groaned at the absolute mess. Apologizing again, she said she'd get some tea ready, asking him to wait a moment. She thought doubtfully that all she had was tea she'd repackaged herself into little bags, and wondered if she could even serve it. She explained to the Duke that it was a tea bag, a little fabric pouch that made brewing tea easier. The Duke asked, intrigued, if the lady herself had made it. She confirmed, a little flustered, but added that she hadn't invented it, though she was the first to use them in this world. His Grace tried the tea and said it wasn't bitter, nor too weak, but just right. When the girl offered to brew another tea if he didn't like it, he replied that he did like it. Then she offered to pack a few bags for him to take with him, and he gladly accepted her offer. Ciela thought he must be in a good mood, because the trade deal had gone well, and he was even smiling. She congratulated him on the successful completion of the trade with the Western Kingdom. Dietrich asked if the rumors had already spread, and the girl noted that the capital was buzzing about it. He replied that he didn't know, as he had only just returned, and she thought with surprise that he really had come straight here. So, she asked if it was true he came straight here without even stopping by his own estate. The Duke pointed out he already said that if her intel checked out, he'd acknowledge her as his benefactor. Then he wondered, wouldn't it be best to head straight to his gracious benefactor then? The girl thought, even the Emperor's wary of Duke Cramen, and yet he's calling her his benefactor. She admitted to herself she was so happy she could barely keep a straight face, and she noted that he didn't seem like the type to hand out empty praise. Then the Duke asked her if all she really wanted was for him to sponsor her orphanage. He inquired if there was anything else Milady required. In response, the heroine asked that instead of calling her Milady, he call her Ciela. She added that if he wasn't comfortable with that, Perunt would also work, explaining she just couldn't get used to Milady. The heroine pointed out that no one had ever even called her princess before. Seeing his reaction, she figured it was probably an unreasonable request. The Duke said her name, adding that it was the first time he'd ever called a lady by her first name, so he felt a little awkward. The girl quickly replied that she didn't think it was awkward at all. Then he said he'd practice until he could say it more naturally. She was surprised he'd practice saying her name, and thought the Duke suddenly seemed awfully sweet. Then Dietrich asked Ciela if she really didn't need anything else, and told her to speak freely. She wondered to herself, how much could she ask for as the Duke's benefactor, especially considering there were still plot points from the original story that needed fixing. The heroine wondered if any of the kids from the orphanage were in danger. Would his lordship be able to protect them? He swore on his honor that he'd protect the kids from the orphanage, and she started thanking him. But the Duke cut her off, asking who would protect her then, pointing out that her request only included the children. He reminded her that it was the same when they first met in his territory, and even now. Flustered, she tried to explain it was because the kids were weaker than her, but he countered that strength didn't matter. From what he could see, he stated, Sylvia wasn't looking out for her own well-being at all. She responded that she barely had time to watch over the kids and asked when she was supposed to worry about herself. The Duke stated that, like he said, if the orphanage was in danger, he'd protect not just the kids, but her too. Sylvia replied that she didn't understand why His Grace cared about her so much. He explained that sponsorship meant responsibility. And since he told the Emperor's envoy that only his family would support them, he had to keep his word. Ciela realized she'd always just seen him as the sidekick, the guy backing up the main hero. But hearing him talk now, she got that he was way more awesome than she ever gave him credit for. Wrapping up the chat, she told him she'd be counting on him from here on out. Later that night, she was replaying her talk with the Duke, especially what he said about always having her back, no matter what. She breathed a sigh of relief, thinking how she was always the one protecting everyone else, never the one being protected. She noticed that talking with the Duke had her heart doing this weird, fluttery thing. She wondered if she'd feel like this every time they met up. But then she snapped back to reality, reminding herself they were just a sponsor and a director, and they probably wouldn't be seeing each other all that much. She stepped outside and was totally blown away by the night sky. Just then, Jack walked up to her. She was surprised to see the kid, wrapped him up, and asked why he wasn't asleep, especially in this cold. Jack explained he saw her come outside and wanted to talk to her. They sat down on a bench. The director suggested he come inside, but he refused, saying it felt stuffy in there, and he'd rather talk out here. Then Jack reminded her that she had asked before if he wanted to pursue his education. Miss Ciela, looking concerned, pointed out he was sitting too close to the edge, and he confirmed he wanted to study. But he doubted if it was really possible for someone like him. She told Jack he should study if he wanted to, but the boy said he'd heard it was expensive, and asked who would take care of the kids if he went to school, since he thought as the oldest, he should be the one looking after them, and he'd feel selfish ignoring them for his own desires. Jack admitted he was so frustrated with himself and started to whine. Ciela figured he was like her in a past life, another kid who gave up on dreams and chances. She'd walked that road herself, but she couldn't let Jack shoulder that burden so young. She wondered if there was anything she could do to help him. She was stuck thinking about what to say, reassure him, or tell him he was already doing great. In the end, she decided to just tell Jack what she desperately wished she'd heard from others in his shoes. She told him he's just Jack, and he doesn't need to worry about so much stuff. She admitted that, because of her screw-ups, he'd been stuck taking care of everyone. But she promised it wouldn't happen again, and urged him to do what he wants, and study if he wants to study. Ciela vowed to take responsibility for everything and protect everyone at the orphanage, so he could just be a 14-year-old kid. The director suggested they talk about his studies tomorrow after a good night's sleep, which he agreed to and thanked her for. So Jack bailed first. Knowing him, she figured he'd regret showing his feelings, and he'd start avoiding her again. Ciela hoped it wouldn't drive them apart. The director was lost in thought and didn't even notice Clone at first. She got annoyed, asking why he wasn't asleep yet. Clone, stammering, asked if she was hurt because of him, and offered her a bandage. The girl was surprised how the kid knew about the injury, since she'd tried so hard to hide it. When Clone hesitantly added that if she didn't need it, she should just say so, she quickly assured the boy that she definitely did need it, and thanked him, since he used to not care whether she was hurt or not. Meanwhile, a messenger reported that Duke Crayman declared the Crayman House would be the sole sponsor of Sylvia's orphanage. The doomed subordinate had almost resigned himself to the thought that he was a goner. The Emperor smirked, convinced there was something going on between the orphanage director and the Duke. Then, His Majesty said he was ready to give another order. The subordinate lit up and promised not to disappoint him again. After a while, the Emperor arrived in his study, where his personal secretary was already waiting. Yeoman asked if they'd found the child yet. The secretary replied that they hadn't found them yet. Then, the enraged Emperor threw an inkwell at the assistant's head. Then, with indignation and irritation, he sighed, declaring that he hated utter screw-ups. The subordinate hastened to assure him that he would do everything possible to find them as soon as possible. The Emperor rudely ordered him to get out. Left alone, the Emperor pondered that, just as he had done, someone else could also chop off his head and take the throne. That's exactly why he eliminated everyone who had a claim to the throne. The Emperor worried he still had two loose ends to tie up: Duke Crayman and that kid. He mentally cursed his dead brother. wondering where he'd stashed the brat. Then, steeling himself, he declared that no matter where the kid was hiding, even in the deepest pit, he'd find him and finish the job. Ciela was stoked that the first sponsor money was coming in today and decided to hustle to the bank. But her worries were right. Jack was giving her the cold shoulder. He was so absorbed in his book, he totally blanked the boss. Ren and Rudy wished her luck and told her to be careful. She said okay and promised to be back soon. Even though she was bummed, she told herself that at least he'd been pretty open that night. He'd shared what was bugging him, so she wasn't totally let down. Suddenly, someone called out to the boss. Ciela turned around and saw Jack. He urged her to take care of herself and to make sure she came back. The heroine was touched by the boy's words and promised she'd grant all his requests. The Duke asked his assistant if he'd transferred the sponsorship money. Rick confirmed it, but mumbled something about the amount. Dietrich cut him off, asking if it wasn't enough. The heroine was stunned and repeated, "How much did he say?" The bank employee had to repeat that the Kramen house sent 1,000 gold for Sylvia's orphanage. The girl was still reeling from the amount. Remembering the Duke had mentioned monthly payments, she wondered if he'd sent the whole year's worth at once, but figured it was probably a mistake. The heroine started calculating. If he sent 1,000 gold every month, that'd be 12,000 gold a year. She wondered if maybe this was the Duke's first time donating, and he didn't know the right amount. Or maybe for the richest dude in the whole damn empire. 1,000 gold pieces is just pocket change. So, Ciela decided she had to meet him. When the carriage pulled up to the orphanage, Ciela told the driver to take her somewhere else instead, and he was cool with it. She thanked him and said she was just grabbing her stuff and would be right back. Suddenly, someone called out to the director. She turned around and saw the Emperor's messenger hurrying towards her. She got worried, but the guy excitedly yelled that he was super glad she was finally back. The girl wondered, why is this envoy here again? Could it be about that special favor thing again? She already turned it down flat last time. The messenger was quick to reassure her, saying he was just there to deliver a letter from the Emperor. The young man promised he'd leave as soon as she took it. Ciela took the letter from the Imperial Palace, surprised, and the messenger left, just like he said he would. Back inside, she got worried, wondering where the kids were. They probably hid because of that fancy-looking guy. She figured she needed to hire someone to guard the orphanage. Every time she leaves, she's scared something might happen to the kids. She decided it had to be someone she could trust, completely. But the only people she really knows are characters from the novel. She realized he's the one she needs, a dependable guy, someone who can protect the place. Meanwhile, Ciela headed upstairs and heard some noises coming from the kids' bedroom. Sounds like they're having a lesson or something. Clone was arguing that 1 + 1 = 1, but Jack was setting him straight. Ren nailed those problems, and Jack complimented her on the awesome job. Meanwhile, Rudy had curled up for a nap on the floor, which Miss Ciela thought was just the cutest thing. Then Jack asked Eddie to give those problems a shot. Eddie hesitated a bit, saying the problem looked tough, but she'd give it her best try. Watching this, the heroine thought about how great and adorable Eddie was. The girl couldn't believe Jack was teaching kids. It totally got to her. She figured he must really believe that education is super important. Ciela made a silent promise to Jack that she'd do everything she could to make sure he could study. Okay, she couldn't send him to some fancy academy for rich kids, but she could definitely hire a tutor for him. But first, the heroine decided, she needed to sort out this whole donation situation. The thought of 1,000 gold coins still had her hands shaking. After grabbing everything she wanted, Ciela headed to the carriage and told him it was time to roll. The coachman met her and asked where to next. She told him to take her to Duke Kramen's estate, which totally surprised him. After a while, the coachman announced they'd arrived at the Duke Kramen's estate. Looking worried, he asked her if she was seriously going in there. He started trying to talk her out of it, saying she probably didn't know anything about the Duke. But he's a ruthless, battle-crazy dude, and not exactly playing with a full deck, if you catch my drift. So, it'd be way better for her to just go back to the orphanage. Ciela calmly replied that he shouldn't run his mouth if he doesn't know the whole story. She told the driver she'd heard whispers like that, but hearing it firsthand just pissed her off. The heroine went off defending the Duke, saying the Duke she knows is a man of his word. She said he's always treated her with respect, and he's way more decent and kind than anyone gives him credit for. As she approached the gates, one of the guards asked her what brings her here. The heroine firmly replied that she came to see His Grace. The guards asked her if she had an appointment. She admitted she didn't, but asked them to tell the Duke that Sylvia Perront was here to deliver on her promise. The girl assured them the Duke would understand. The guards huddled up and told her to wait. Ciela thought with relief that she had pulled it off. The main character asked the shivering coachman if he was scared, and he admitted he was terrified. He added that he couldn't leave a lady out here alone. Ciela smiled and reassured him, saying nothing bad would happen. The girl insisted he shouldn't worry so much, and that Duke Crayman wasn't as scary as the rumors made him out to be. The coachman asked, surprised, if she knew the Duke well. She replied modestly that she knew him a little, since they'd met a couple of times. Then the coachman asked if the lady was from high nobility. Ciela responded that she wasn't, and that she wasn't even from the border nobility. The girl added that she was a fallen aristocrat, no different from a commoner. Suddenly, the sound of approaching hooves and the creaking of gates echoed. The heroine guessed that the knight must be returning. To her surprise, the Duke himself came out to her and addressed her by name. She greeted him shyly, using his title. The Duke said he heard she wanted to see him, so he came to get her himself. Everyone was in shock that His Grace would do something like that. She thanked him, admitting to herself that seeing the Duke reminded her of his promise to protect her. The girl apologized for coming unannounced, explaining she wanted to give him something and talk. Dietrich reassured her it was no problem, that she could do anything, leaving Ciela stunned and asking what he meant. The Duke told Sylvia she was one of his people, so she could come any time, and she thanked him, flustered. His Excellency invited her inside. The girl agreed, but said she'd then get into the carriage. The Duke was surprised, asking if she planned to go to the estate by carriage, and Ciela confirmed it. Then Dietrich said his horse was faster than a carriage. She countered that she wasn't very good at riding. She even hired a carriage. The driver yelled that she didn't need to worry about a thing. The girl also mentioned she had a little something as a thank you, and Rick offered to carry it for her. Dietrich said if Ciela didn't know how to get on the horse, he'd give her a hand. He hopped up on the horse first, and then he reached down to help her up. She apologized for the trouble. He reassured her, said she wouldn't fall, and told her not to be scared, just lean back against him. Ciela thought to herself that she was way more comfortable than she expected, and wondered if he was being so careful with the horse because of her. She also thought they were so close, she could hear his heart beating, or maybe it was just her own heart pounding like crazy. The heroine noticed the Duke's estate was surrounded by a lush green forest, and took note. She didn't have time to look around on her first visit, but now, taking it all in, the forest seemed absolutely massive. The Duke asked the heroine if her injured ankle was feeling any better. He explained that he'd noticed it was swollen last time he saw her at the orphanage. Ciela replied that it had already healed, she was fine, and thanked him for his concern. The girl thought that among the children, only Clone had noticed she was hurt, but the Duke saw it too. When the orphanage went bust and Clone was separated from the other kids, he wandered into this forest and met Duke Crayman. Ciela remembered that after that meeting, the Duke adopted Clone, and they became family. However, she noted that because of her, the story's plot had already changed, and Sylvia's orphanage would never go bankrupt. On one hand, the heroine regretfully thought that the connection between Duke Crayman and Clone had vanished. But on the other hand, the lives of the children after the closure wouldn't be like in the original plot. For a second, she thought about the people she felt really bad for. The Duke, noticing her pensiveness, asked what was wrong. She just said everything was fine, real short. Back at the mansion, she thought the living room looked like a freaking ballroom. But she caught herself thinking, now's not the time to be daydreaming. Then she handed him the package, explaining she'd made him a bunch of tea bags with different flavors. She added that she felt bad she only gave him one last time, so she made a whole lot more this time around. The Duke took a whiff of the gift and commented on the pleasant aroma. She said the tea bags could even be used like sachets, and Dietrich asked, "What's a sachet?" Ciela remembered back in her old life. They had air fresheners made from coffee or herbs, so tea bag sachets are a great idea. She asked him to try them and tell her if he liked them, and promised if he did, she'd make him more. Then she said there was something she wanted to tell him. Suddenly, Rick walked into the room, apologized, and placed a cup of tea on the table. The girl was pleasantly surprised that he'd already used one of the tea bags she'd made. Rick explained that the master only uses it for important occasions, and today he specifically ordered him to use it. She was surprised that the Duke liked the tea so much. Rick said he'd heard she was the one who invented the tea bag, and asked if it was true. She confirmed it. He called it a groundbreaking invention. The Duke proposed that, if she didn't mind, the Crayman house would invest in this project and launch it into commercial production. He assured her that all rights to the tea bags would remain with her, and the terms would be drawn up in her favor. He added that the details would be described in the contract, and of course, the girl could refuse. Although, in Dietrich's opinion, it's a pretty sweet deal. The heroine was stunned. Thinking she'd just gotten a legit investment offer, she asked for some time to mull it over, and Dietrich agreed. The heroine thought to herself, "That's not why I came here." Then she turned to the Duke, saying she needed to tell him something. Dietrich asked, "What's up?" Ciela declared that the sponsorship amount was way too high. She admitted to herself that talking about money always made her sweat. The Duke asked Rick if it was true he'd pledged 1,000 gold, and his subordinate confirmed it. Ciela exclaimed again that it was too much, and the Duke looked surprised. He replied that the amount had already been significantly reduced after consulting with Rick, and asked, "What do you mean, too much?" She figured she and this guy were on totally different wavelengths when it came to money, what with him being born a duke and all. Then she explained she'd agreed on 50 gold pieces, because that's about what nobles usually chip in. The Duke stated flat out he wasn't about to donate the same as your average aristocrat, and that he hadn't said exactly 50 gold pieces, but around that. Dietrich said he understood the girl's surprise, but he explained that he wanted the kids he was sponsoring to live better than the rest, adding that the money showed he was serious. He hoped she'd accept it without feeling like it was a burden. Ciela realized that coming here to complain about the sponsorship amount was a pretty short-sighted move. After all, she is the director of the orphanage he's sponsoring, so she said she understood what the Duke was getting at. She also admitted she'd jumped to conclusions and stated she'd gratefully accept his donation. With the sponsorship thing settled, His Grace confessed there was something he wanted to know. So, the girl asked if she could ask a question. The Duke wanted to know if Milady had been invited to the Empire's anniversary banquet. Surprise froze on the heroine's face, and he asked again, "Didn't she get an invitation?" The girl realized the invitation the Duke was showing was exactly like the one the Emperor's messenger gave her. Judging by her expression, Dietrich figured Ciela already got one. Deep down, she was confused, because a fallen aristocrat would never get invited to a banquet like that. And she wondered, when did the Emperor find out she was involved with Duke Crayman? She guessed maybe it was from the moment he sent the first message. The Duke, using her name, said he was worried something might happen to her because of him. He admitted he didn't want Ciela at the banquet, but pointed out that refusing was the same as disobeying the Emperor. To keep her safe, he offered to enter the palace with her, but warned her not to do anything that would draw attention. Instead, Dietrich offered to send a carriage and an escort, and asked her not to refuse and to accept them. She was really surprised that he'd send a carriage for her, since she thought she'd have to hire one herself. She thanked the Duke with a smile for thinking of it, and said she'd gladly accept his help. He smiled back and agreed that it was a good idea. At the end of the meeting, the heroine thanked the Duke, and he replied that he looked forward to seeing her at the banquet. The heroine also thanked Mr. Hanaman for his interest in the tea bags. He suggested she just call him Rick. Meanwhile, two guards who were gossiping were talking about his lordship addressing the lady by her first name. The heroine said it was time for her to go, citing dinner time and worrying about the kids. The Duke escorted his guest out, went back to his study, and got back to reading. Rick asked the boss why he cared so much about her, admitting the lady helped them crush it in trade. But it seemed to him the boss's attention was about more than that. Dietrich confirmed the deal was a total win, and the Crayman house made a killing, but in return, they had to make donations for 10 years. Plus, the amount was insane. Investing in freaking tea bags and the contract terms, it all favored Milady. Then Dietrich dropped the thought that if they'd been born to normal parents, Rick wouldn't have turned his back on his family, and he himself wouldn't have become a monster. Rick asked what that had to do with her. The Duke explained they didn't have guardians who genuinely cared about them. But for those kids, she could be an amazing guardian. He said he just wanted to see the kids in that orphanage happy. Rick wondered if His Grace was really going to settle for living vicariously through others. Dietrich agreed that maybe he was, and Rick pointed out that just being a sponsor would be enough. Then he asked why the Duke decided to get into the teabag business. Dietrich said he just really loved the smell, that's all. Of course, he didn't admit what he really liked. The next morning, the heroine was mentally listing things off. Mrs. Clover would sew the dress, and she'd found shoes she hadn't managed to sell yet. The heroine pondered, asking herself if it was okay if she didn't wear any jewelry. But then she doubted herself, wondering if she'd stand out even more if she showed up to the banquet without any bling. The girl stated that there was just way too much to get ready for the banquet. She mentioned all the upper crust would be there and wondered if it was an invitation or a summons. Ciela even considered selling her baronetcy. It's gotta be worth a fortune, right? If she was just a regular nobody, she wouldn't have to go to the banquet. And His Grace would probably breathe a little easier too. Then it hit her. The orphanage is part of the Baroness Peyron's holdings. So, crap, Ciela definitely can't sell the title, which means she's stuck going to this dumb banquet. Suddenly, someone tugged at her sleeve. It was Clone. The director asked the boy if something was wrong. He asked, all worked up, if she was going somewhere alone again. Clone said, with a little whine, that she always takes off by herself and leaves them behind. Ciela said Clone's name with regret, but the kid corrected her, saying it wasn't just about him. He added that all the kids wanted to get out. The girl thought about it, and Clone was right. She asked herself, when was the last time the kids even went anywhere? The last time they went out was a month ago. The heroine bitterly realized that trying to keep them safe, she'd ended up locking them up in the orphanage. The girl called out to the kids and suggested they have a big breakfast first, and then they'd all go to the market together. The kids couldn't believe their luck. They were finally going out. The coachman brought the kids and Lady Ciela to the central market. The kids excitedly pointed out how many people there were and all the stalls. The heroine warned that it would be a total disaster if the kids got lost and suggested they hold hands and stick together. That's when Clone's so-called antics started. He started screaming that he didn't want to and begged to be let go. The kid climbed a tree, then begged for help getting down, and then complained that he got hurt. Clone was the only one they had to watch like a hawk, so Ciela called Ren for backup. The girl firmly addressed Clone, repeating her offer to hold hands and walk together. She asked Clone if he didn't like holding hands. He vehemently denied it, saying he loved it, actually. Miss Ciela pointed out that Rudy was too little and suggested that Eddie and Jack keep an eye on her. The girl asked Eddie if she would hold Rudy's hand. The girl expressed doubt, noting that Rudy seemed to like Ren better. Gaining her courage, Eddie timidly asked if Rudy would hold her big sister's hand. To Eddie's surprise, Rudy was totally down with it. Miss Ciela suggested they check out the marketplace. They started browsing the stalls, and at first, everything was chill. But before long, the heroine was chasing Clone all over the market as he ran from stall to stall, totally stoked. He wanted to touch everything and see everything, and when she spotted a toy shop, the heroine breathed a sigh of relief. She announced that everyone could pick out one toy they wanted. The kids asked, full of disbelief and joy, if she was serious. Clone grabbed a toy almost immediately, saying he wanted that ball, and that's it. Then, the heroine asked Ren if she really wanted needles and thread as her toy. She gently suggested she might want to look at something else. Just then, Jack announced that he, Eddie, and Rudy had made their choices too. The heroine was a little taken aback and asked Rudy if she really liked swords that much. Ciela remembered perfectly well that Rudy became a gladiator in the original story, but the kid was just picking a sword as a toy right now. Rudy replied that it was because she wanted to protect people. The girl started listing exactly who she wanted to protect: Sister Ren and Sister Eddie, Brother Clone and Brother Jack. Suddenly, Rudy seriously declared that she'd protect the director too. The heroine was flattered and said that she would protect all the kids in her orphanage as well. Suddenly, Clone turned to his brother, pointing at the building full of books that Jack loved so much, and suggested they go check it out. Jack said they couldn't leave this toy store without paying. The shopkeeper suggested they all head over to the bookstore together while she wrapped up their purchases. The bookstore clerk said they weren't getting any customers anyway, so the kids could browse as long as they wanted. Ciela thanked him, and then she just happened to find a book called A Guide to Herbs for Great-Smelling Teas. She couldn't get Dietrich out of her head. The way he smiled and said the tea smelled so good. The girl started making excuses to herself, thinking this book wasn't for the Duke. She was just interested in herbs. She figured it might list herbs that are good for kids. That's why she was reading it. Then Ciela decided to put the book back. But out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Jack was totally engrossed in some other book. From some of the pictures, she figured out what it was about. This book was about the deceased emperor and empress, and everyone knows they didn't have any kids, but actually they had a secret child. The novel said that 14 years ago, right before the Second Prince's Rebellion, a child was born. The Empress used magic to change his appearance, and the child was entrusted to a maid. She was supposed to hide him in a place with no connections whatsoever. The surviving member of the imperial family that nobody knows about is Jack Frit. In the original story, about a year from now, Miss Ciela finds out the magic on the kid wore off. She heads to the Emperor to report it and get a reward, but His Majesty planned to take care of Ciela, to keep her quiet for good. Realizing this, Ciela dropped everything and bolted. After that, soldiers stormed the orphanage, and Jack, dragged to the imperial palace against his will, was taken care of by the Emperor himself. But that tragedy is just the story from the original timeline. The heroine, with unwavering resolve, swore to herself that she would never, ever let it happen and wouldn't let Jack die. Miss Ciela got closer to Jack and asked him if he liked the book. Jack slammed the book shut and answered, short and sharp, that no, he was just taking a look out of curiosity. Miss Ciela told Jack that if he found a book he did like, she'd buy it for him. The kid just said he'd pick something else. The book was about the history of the imperial family and the central aristocracy. At Madame Clover's fabric shop, the saleswoman greeted the customers politely. But a second later, she exclaimed in surprise and concern, because she noticed these customers looked like they were stocking up big time. The saleswoman asked the heroine if she was really carrying all that by herself. She replied, "I can't make the kids carry the bags, can I?" The saleswoman offered to let her leave the packages there. Then the saleswoman asked if these were the same kids the customer had mentioned before. She just said we're totally cute. Ciela chirped that the saleslady is going to flip when she hears how much we dig Miss Clover's clothes. The heroine mentioned that they're here today to get some clothes for the kids and a dress for herself. The saleswoman, surprised, asked about the dress, and Ciela explained she needs something for a fancy shindig. The saleswoman, unsure if she'll like it, said the dresses are inside the workshop. Miss Ciela asked Jack to watch the kids for a sec, went into the workshop, and noticed every single dress was gorgeous. She gasped, totally blown away by one dress in particular. Ms. Clover confirmed that it's one of the ones she sold her before, and explained she took it apart and tweaked it a little. Ciela admitted she never realized the color was so amazing, since it used to be buried under all those heavy decorations. "Why'd you hide this dress back here instead of showing it off, Ms. Clover?" she asked. "I think it's absolutely gorgeous." Ms. Clover blushed and admitted, "I used to have my own boutique, but it went belly up. So I guess I just don't trust my own judgment anymore." Ciela jumped in. "No way! Look at the clean finishing, the incredible craftsmanship. It's obvious you're amazing." Without even looking at the other dresses, she declared, "I'm buying this one, period. I seriously doubt I'll find anything better." Seeing how flustered the seamstress was, probably because of her first sale in ages, the heroine tried to reassure her. "I can tell how much love you pour into your work," she said. "I'm thrilled to be the one who gets to wear this dress. By the way," the heroine added, "I'm Ciela." She thanked Ciela and even got a little teary-eyed. Meanwhile, the kids kept exploring the shop. Ren went over to a fabric that reminded her of the night sky. The kids were sharing how awesome everything was, saying the market was incredible. Clone was surprised, saying no one had treated them like they were trash. Rudy agreed, adding that it felt like they'd landed in a whole new world. The girl remembered a fairy tale she saw in a bookstore, where the main character stumbled into a strange land full of wonders. Ren agreed that they were feeling the same way, like they'd ended up in some magical country too, because their lives had totally changed. The bad guys are gone, and the director started giving them new clothes and good food. Plus, they can run around and yell whenever they want. Suddenly, a worried Eddie came up to them, saying she remembered the hero in the story goes back to his own world. The girl asked if they were gonna have to go back to their old lives too. Then Jack firmly declared that they weren't going back to how things were before, and swore he'd protect them all. Clone eagerly backed Jack up, saying she'd protect everyone with him, and told her siblings not to worry. Ren replied that she believed him. Ruli exclaimed she believed in her brother too, and Eddie gave an embarrassed smile, saying she did too. Watching this, Jack promised himself that no matter what happened, he wanted to protect his younger siblings and would do anything for them. Suddenly, Ciela approached the kids and asked what they were up to. Roulet ran up and said they were looking at fabrics. Ren showed the headmistress the fabric that looked like the night sky. Miss Ciela agreed that the fabric really did resemble a starry night. Meanwhile, Jack was thinking that something had changed now, And the headmistress had also become one of the people he wanted to protect. The children, mesmerized by the beautiful fabric, asked to see more. Admitting it was the first time they'd ever seen something so beautiful, Ciela figured they were probably trying to soak it all in, not knowing when they'd see something like this again. It made her kinda sad, thinking they wouldn't have to do that anymore. Jack, voicing what everyone was worried about, straight up asked Miss Ciela if they should be scared of going back to how things used to be. Before she could answer, he asked what they even meant to her. That question really got Ciela thinking about herself. She remembered how she suddenly became Ciela Perut, driven by wanting to dodge a really bad ending. But then her thoughts snapped back to the here and now. Right now, all she wants is for every kid from her orphanage to grow up healthy and happy. She wants to be the adult and guardian for them that she needed when she was a kid, but never had. She confirmed that she is their guardian. It was a choice she made, and she'll protect them with everything she's got. After hearing her heartfelt words, Jack said he'd try to believe her and asked her to keep her promise. Ciela agreed, calm and resolute. Then, she turned her attention to the other kids. They tried on the new clothes. Ciela said adoringly how cute they looked, and that everything fit them perfectly. She announced she was buying everything, and the saleswoman couldn't believe her ears. Ciela, pointing to the fabric that reminded the kids of the night sky and that they loved so much, declared that she was buying that too. And so evening arrived. Ciela told the kids that the coachman would pick them up before sunset, and he'd be there soon. The kids responded wearily, but obediently. Ciela noticed that Ren especially loved that particular fabric. And then I remembered that the girl in the toy store picked out a sewing kit. I got curious if she was really into it, so I asked Ren if she had decided what she wanted to make with the fabric. Ren answered without hesitation that she wanted to make warm socks for Rudy and a nice handkerchief for Eddie. And her sewing plans also included knee pads for Clone, who falls down a lot, and a bookmark for Jack. Then she added that she wanted to give a scented sachet to the headmistress, and Ciela asked in surprise if she was getting one too. Ren explained that it was because Ciela makes them delicious food every day, and that's why she wanted to make her a gift. That sincerity really got to Ciela, and she wondered, since when did the girl stop avoiding her gaze? The headmistress couldn't believe that Ren had started looking at her with such trust. She admitted to herself that she didn't know how to handle all the emotions she was feeling, but out loud, she just calmly replied that she was looking forward to the gift. Rudy invited the headmaster to join them on the bench, but Ciela wondered if there was enough space for 6. But the girl confidently assured him it was fine, and if they sat just right, they could all fit. Watching everyone squeeze in, Ciela thought to herself how clever the kids were. Then she suggested they all hang out again sometime. They could bring a blanket, some food, and have a picnic. What did everyone think? The idea was met with total enthusiasm. Rudy immediately said she wanted to go on a picnic with everyone. The other kids were shy, but they started to agree quietly too. Clone said if Ren liked the idea, then he was in. Jack also quietly supported the suggestion, saying he liked the idea too. Seeing everyone so happy, Ciela promised firmly that they would definitely all go on a picnic together. But her last thought drifted back to the near future, reminding her the banquet was just around the corner. Ciela remembered the Duke's worried face, how he feared she might get hurt because of him. Luckily, nothing bad had happened yet, and just then, the coachman arrived. Back at the orphanage, preparations for the banquet were in full swing, the boys waiting for the director to finish getting ready. Eddie yelled out that everything was set, and Clone, with a mix of annoyance and relief, exclaimed they were finally done. But walking into the room and seeing the director, Clone was so stunned, he said Miss Ciela looked as beautiful as an angel. Flustered by the compliment, Ciela stammered, asking if she really looked okay, if everything was all right. Ren asked Clone what he was frozen for. Turns out, the kid was sulking because the other kids were playing without him and his brother. They reminded him he was just asked to wait until the director was done getting ready. Suddenly, all eyes were glued to the carriage pulling up. The kids went wild, yelling about how huge and shiny it was. Rudy asked if the headmistress was really riding that thing to the castle, and what was going to be there. Clone chimed in, saying the Emperor would be there, of course, and knights with awesome swords. The thought of awesome swords and knights totally hyped the kids up, and Jack was watching it all closely. He suddenly remembered some woman begging him to listen carefully, so he'd know what to do if he was ever exposed. The boy turned to the headmistress, and getting worked up, begged her not to go to the imperial palace. Responding to Jack's worries, Ciela gently calmed him, assuring him that she'd be fine and nothing bad would happen. The heroine hugged the boy and asked him to just patiently wait for her to come back. Jack, trying to hide how he really felt, mumbled that he wasn't worried, but then firmly added that she had better come back safe. Ciela, touched by his concern, turned to all the children and announced that when she returned tomorrow, she'd be bringing someone new with her. The kids asked with curiosity, "Who exactly?" Ciela told the children that she would bring someone who would protect them all. On the way back to the palace, the heroine pondered her plan. She remembered that according to the original story, a certain place opens up during receptions at the imperial palace. Ciela was certain that the person who became Rudy's fencing instructor in the original story would be there. Ciela's plan was to slip away unnoticed from the reception at the right moment. She was counting on her low status to allow her to go unnoticed. Ciela tried to convince herself that she just needed to stick to the plan, but anxiety gripped her. She was even more nervous than when she wrote to Duke Creeman and wondered if she could really pull it off. She was worried about how the Duke would react. He'd probably blow a gasket if he found out what she was planning. Finally, the carriage was almost there. She hoped like hell His Grace was at the Imperial Palace right now. Meanwhile, Dietrich had already been cooling his heels outside the doors for half an hour. He was getting seriously ticked off watching the clock. Finally, the guards announced that the Duke was cleared to enter. Naturally, Dietrich was pissed that he wasn't invited to the audience hall, but to the Emperor's private office. He respectfully greeted His Majesty, while making it clear he found the location unusual. The Emperor waved off the formalities and told him to take a seat. He started by congratulating her on the successful trade deal, pointing out it would really boost the empire. The Duke offered a polite thank you. Then the Emperor cut to the chase, saying he was really curious how she'd managed to find a path to the Western Kingdom. The Duke answered briefly that he had an assistant. The Emperor pressed to know who this assistant was. Dietrich named Rick Henneman. The Emperor immediately guessed it was the second son of the Henneman house. The Duke confirmed it. He added that he was a genuinely sharp guy. In closing, the Emperor made a loaded comment. He said the Duke had been racking up wins in the war, and now he was killing it in trade too, exceeding all expectations. The Emperor made a surprising statement, saying that if he were his son, he'd really value him, at least way more than the late Duke Creeman ever did. He pressed, wanting to know if the Duke agreed, reminding him that the former Duke insulted and despised him, calling him a monster. And then he just dumped me on the brutal battlefield. Then, out of nowhere, the Emperor switches gears, saying he heard I was sponsoring an orphanage. He acted all curious, pointing out I'd never done anything like that before, which he found interesting. I kept my cool and told him the Creeman family was planning on launching some charity projects down the line. I added that the sponsorship was just the first step. The Emperor conceded that it sounded reasonable, but he wouldn't let it go, straight up asking why I was so invested in Lady Ciela's orphanage specifically. He emphasized how unusually focused I was on the place, and then hinted, asking if I had some kind of connection with the director. I told him my relationships were none of His Majesty's business. Besides, it's just a normal relationship between a benefactor and someone they're helping out. The Emperor, with this fake smile, said he understood. So then, I asked if I was dismissed, and without waiting for an answer, I walked out. After he left, the Emperor asked his courtier about the prince's whereabouts. The courtier replied that the prince was probably hiding somewhere. The Emperor scoffed, adding it was pathetic the prince was reacting so strongly to a few words. He ordered them to find the prince immediately and bring him back. Then, the Emperor, thinking out loud, said he needed to plant a couple of guys in the banquet hall. He wants to see if the orphanage director really means nothing to the Duke, or if she might be his Achilles' heel. Meanwhile, the Duke walked along, thinking he hadn't been called a monster in a long time. Lady Ciela's recent words echoed in his head, that the Duke was the strongest and kindest person she had ever met. Meanwhile, as Ciela walked toward the palace, her attention was drawn to sounds like a child crying. She was sure they were coming from the garden, and she started wandering around there. After a few minutes, the girl found a little boy who asked in fright, "Who's there?" The kid, all freaked out, asked if his dad sent her. Hearing dad and seeing the blonde hair, Ciela realized with a jolt who he was. She thought, no way, it's the original story's deuteragonist, Sadie Freeze. The heroine instantly remembered his fate. He trusted nobody and was obsessed with Ren, and it all stemmed from the brutal way his tyrant father raised him. The poor guy tried so hard to fill that empty heart with some kind of love. He was the only prince in the history of the empire who just couldn't win the girl. Ciela couldn't believe the deuteragonist was such a cutie as a kid. She thought he was like a puppy. Sadie, getting no answer, got all suspicious and said she was acting real shady. The boy's words snapped the heroine out of her thoughts. Ciela started thinking fast. She figured that, most likely, after today, she'd never be setting foot in the imperial palace again. So, she could just play it like she didn't recognize him. The heroine decided to introduce herself as just some lost passerby who was new to the palace. She told him it was her first time in the palace and she'd gotten lost on a walk. Sadie asked suspiciously if that was really true. Seeing that her excuse worked, and noting to herself that little Sadie was still trusting and innocent, she was relieved. The heroine started gradually approaching him. The boy panicked and asked why she was getting so close. Ciela replied that her legs were tired, and she wanted to rest a bit, sitting next to him under the tree. Sadie indignantly asked again why she was sitting next to him. The heroine replied that this particular tree just looked comfortable to her. The girl asked him to ignore her. Then the boy asked again if she really didn't know who he was. Ciela repeated that no, she didn't, and that this was her first time at the palace. Confirming that her lie worked again, the heroine was inwardly pleased. Then, seizing the moment, she gently asked him why he was crying, and if something bad had happened. The kid just spat back, all bitter, that he was just a dumb loser, that there wasn't a single good thing about him. He felt like everything he did just let everyone down. And then he dropped the bomb, saying he wished he'd never been born. Ciela, after hearing him out, quietly and thoughtfully repeated his last line about wishing he hadn't been born. She'd heard that kind of talk before, but she stood her ground, saying there's no one in this world who shouldn't have been born. The kid, totally surprised, asked her, why? Ciela explained that if he hadn't been born, she'd be bummed, because then they wouldn't have bumped into each other and had this talk. The kid, with a glimmer of hope in his voice, asked again, like, did she really mean that? Ciela doubled down, solid as a rock. The girl added that she'd been feeling down in the dumps a minute ago, 'cause she was lost, but now she was stoked to have met him. She said their meeting was a total stroke of luck for her, and the kid, still not buying it, asked if she was just pulling his leg. Ciela swore she was being totally serious. Touched by how genuine she was, he started talking to the lady, asking her something, but he got cut off. A maid found Ciela and blurted out, all worked up, that the banquet was about to start and she needed to get going. Ciela told the kid she had to leave, but he didn't want her to go. He begged her to stay a little longer, pleading with her to at least tell him her name. A few seconds later, the head servant came up to His Highness. He informed Prince Sadie that he was ordered to return because the banquet was about to begin. To himself, the head servant wondered who the woman was with His Highness. Suddenly, the prince asked him if he would still care about the boy, even if he wasn't the crown prince. The head servant said that even if the boy wasn't a prince, he'd still be an important person to him. So Prince Sadie was stoked and asked for a favor, to keep a certain request totally hush-hush from his dad. The guy agreed and said, just give the word, Your Highness. The prince ordered him to find a woman he'd been talking to recently. The manager promised to find out who she was and report back ASAP. Now we jump to the imperial reception, where the crowd's cheering for His Majesty the Emperor. Everyone there was saying what an honor it was to be in the presence of the Emperor, Empress, and Prince. Meanwhile, Ciela was thinking, since the imperial family's here, I just gotta wait a little longer, then I can bail. She was also dying to know when His Grace the Duke would arrive, 'cause her stomach was seriously growling from hunger. Our girl suddenly remembered she hadn't eaten all freaking day. Something caught her eye. A super cute little cake that she just had to try. After trying it, she was stoked, saying it was amazing and complimented the royal chef, calling his work incredible. That gave her an idea. She should bake a cake for the kids when she gets back. She was feeling super confident in her baking skills. Suddenly, Ciela started to worry about what the kids were up to, and that they were alone back at the orphanage. She was stressing about hiring someone to watch them, but knew she couldn't just grab anyone off the street. She wondered if she'd be able to find a good, kind person for the orphanage tonight, someone totally different from Romanda. One of the guests told her the banquet was top-notch, exactly what you'd expect from the emperor. The guy confessed he was captivated by Lady Ciela Perron's beauty. She was surprised he knew her name. The stranger said he'd been following her for a while now, especially her Sylvia orphanage. He announced that he was now interested in becoming a sponsor and asked if she was disappointed that he had his doubts. Lady Ciela said no way, thinking to herself that dealing with him would be a constant pain in the neck. After saying goodbye and excusing herself, she tried to leave. But the guy stopped her, saying he wasn't finished talking. Politely but firmly, Lady Ciela stated that her orphanage wasn't taking any new donors. The man immediately guessed it was because she was already getting support from the Kramen ducal house. With irritation in his voice, he asked why she only accepted sponsorship from Duke Kramen and turned everyone else down. The girl demanded he let go of her hand, telling him it hurt. The man implied, with a smirk, if she and the Duke were particularly close. Lady Ciela coldly retorted that he was imagining things and was outraged that he was talking nonsense. The man didn't back down, persistently asking what the nature of their relationship was. Since the guy was so desperate to know, the heroine, keeping her cool, said it was a benefactor-beneficiary type of arrangement. Suddenly, the Duke showed up in the banquet hall and announced he was ready to explain why she turned him down. Basically, Dietrich said coldly, there's just no need for her to get help from other families. Is that explanation enough for you? The guy was totally stunned, and so was Ciela herself. Duke Kramen pointed out that the man was gripping Ciela's arm so hard, he was leaving a bruise. Embarrassed, she tried to say everything was fine, and her arm didn't hurt that much. But the Duke insisted she take care of it. This caring attention just fueled the guy's anger even more. He exclaimed indignantly that this didn't seem like a normal benefactor-beneficiary relationship at all. The Duke calmly explained that he only stopped him because he was being way too forceful. The guy started to deny it, but the Duke cut to the chase. Using physical force on people who disagree with him, Dietrich asked, his voice laced with disapproval. Don't you even get the basics? Suddenly, the guy's attention snapped to something in the distance. Ciela wondered what he was staring at, and then it hit her. He was looking at the Emperor himself. That's when it dawned on her. This whole setup was probably planned out meticulously. The whole dynamic shifted the second the guards showed up. Baron Ferrant, completely outraged, yelled, "What in the world do you think you're doing?" The manager stated firmly, "Sir, you're causing a disturbance, and you're going to have to be escorted out." The Baron tried to argue, claiming he was acting under someone's orders. But the manager cut him off, explaining, "I'm acting under His Majesty's direct orders." Just then, the Emperor addressed the crowd, remarking, "I wasn't expecting such a ruckus on a day like this." Then the Emperor turned to Miss Ciela, real polite, calling her Director Sylvia of the orphanage and reminding her she'd turned down his support. The girl bowed respectfully, said it was an honor to see His Majesty, and apologized for that whole thing back then. The Emperor, being all magnanimous, accepted her apology and stated that since Duke Kramen was already backing her, well, extra help probably wasn't needed. Duke Kramen jumped right in then, addressing the Emperor and asking for his pardon. He explained he stepped in because Baron Ferrant looked like he was totally out of his depth. The Emperor said he understood the situation, and since the Duke was vouching for the Baron, everything was cool. He wrapped it up by saying he hoped the lady who got so freaked out would recover soon, and then he dipped out of the banquet hall. After the Emperor left, Ciela was going over everything that happened at the banquet in her head, and she figured that the whole show with Baron Ferrant was staged by the Emperor to see how the Duke would react, and also check out his relationship with Lady Ciela. Right then, the Duke asked her if she was all right. She, still a little shaken up, said yes. The Duke, being all considerate, suggested she go get some rest. While they were walking, she was bummed out, because she figured the Emperor paying her attention was a bad omen. Meanwhile, Lady Ciela was racking her brain, trying to figure out what the Duke was thinking when he stepped in. It seemed to her like even he was surprised by his own impulse. The Duke admitted he didn't know why he did it. Dietrich explained he just saw she was in danger, and his body reacted before his brain could catch up. He apologized if he'd made things awkward for her. She shot back that he didn't need to apologize. She was actually grateful. She confessed she was trying not to show it, but she was freaked out. But when the Duke showed up, she felt relieved. The Duke said it's only natural to help someone who's in danger, and he reminded her about his promise to protect her. Then her thoughts drifted back to the Emperor. She was worried people would think she was mixed up in the trading stuff, but Dietrich calmed her down, saying he'd already told the Emperor Rika was helping out. What bothered him more was the chance of dumb rumors spreading. like they were more than just benefactor and beneficiary. Lady Ciela gasped, picturing the chaos that would cause. With a hint of sarcasm, the Duke asked if Ciela was offended by talk of a connection between the Duke's family and a down-on-her-luck noblewoman. The girl laughed it off, calling it ridiculous. The idea of them being an item. Dietrich told her to forget that nonsense. His tone suddenly turning serious. He quietly said he wasn't good enough for someone like her. Lady Ciela, surprised, asked him to repeat himself, not understanding. Then the Duke bitterly added that a monster couldn't be with a human. Hearing that word, the girl wondered if he was talking about his nickname, the Reaper of the Battlefield. She looked at his grace with such tenderness, saying even if the whole world thinks he's a monster, she's ready to be one too. Scylla told him that, as far as she's concerned, the Duke is one of the kindest, most stand-up guys she's ever met. The Duke, clearly moved by her words, quietly admitted that he's never heard anyone say that about him before. Lady Scylla, with a soft smile, replied that she'll repeat it every time she sees him, and reassured him again that he's a good man. He gently said her name, but just then, the clock tower chimed, cutting their conversation short. The Duke explained that it meant the banquet was over, and Scylla suggested they leave before anyone saw them, but he asked her to wait a moment, then thanked her from the bottom of his heart. She thanked him in return for the day. A little later, someone in a hood stood near the gates. The hooded figure claimed to be Lady Scylla's maid, and tried to leave the estate, but the guard stopped her, reminding her no one was allowed to leave. The girl was insistent, explaining that her mistress had ordered her to bring something absolutely essential, something personal and private. She added that if she came back empty-handed, they'd both be in deep trouble. And hearing that, the guard gave in. Reaching the carriage, the maid boldly climbed inside. The outraged coachman demanded to know if she even knew whose carriage it was. He pointed out that only nobles used such things. Then, the unknown woman lowered her hood and asked if he was the coachman. The man confirmed that he was. Then the girl ordered him to take her to Cannes and to do it as fast as possible. The heroine arrived at the Cannes Casino, the largest legal gambling establishment in the empire, operating with the dynasty's permission. Huge amounts of cash flowed through this place. At the entrance, they asked her what she needed. Following instructions, the girl spoke the password, that she had come to collect her child, and they agreed to take her inside. The heroine knew that once a year, an illegal slave auction was held in the basement of this legal establishment. Stepping inside, she recoiled at the absolute filth of the place, a heavy, soporific scent assaulting her nostrils. The escort explained that the smell was particularly potent for beastkin. When Ciela asked why the aroma was so strong today, she was told it was because a high-class beastkin was up for auction. The escort clarified that it was a feline beastkin, and that's who she and everyone else had come to see. With cold determination, the girl thought that none of them would be getting their hands on a single slave today. She approached one of the guards and faked a faint. Noticing her distress, the guard asked what was wrong. The girl apologized, complaining that the scent was much stronger than usual, and she was very sensitive to it. Ciela asked for an antidote, adding with a sly smile that she had prepared generously for the auction, knowing about the high-class beastkin. And she asked who would be held responsible if she got sick and couldn't buy what she came for. The guard, catching her drift, agreed with her point and gave her the vial, suggesting she use it like perfume. He said one spritz was enough. The girl thought to herself with relief how smart she was to fill the perfume bottle with plain water beforehand. Pretending to use it, she said she felt better. Then she asked if the guard had any word from Vicente. He got flustered and asked, "From who?" She repeated it confidently. The guard tensed up inside, realizing she knew the alias of Khan's shadow, the emperor of the underworld. This meant the lady was from the inner circle, and he got scared. The girl, with fake regret, remarked that she thought the order had already arrived. She demanded to see the beast man before the auction started. The guard objected, saying the merchandise had to go to auction. Otherwise, the price wouldn't be set. But the girl, our heroine, cut him off with a dismissive wave. She told him not to worry. She wasn't planning on buying anything, just wanted to take a look. She slyly added that Vicente wouldn't have given permission otherwise, right, guard? Putting him on the spot. To get her way, she asked the guard what happened to the guy who crossed Vicente at the last auction. The threat worked, and they took her down to the basement. To herself, she worriedly thought she only meant to scare him, but judging by the surroundings, Vicente really did. punish those who disobeyed. The guard explained that the cage was special, with a magic stone, all precautions against one beastman whose power was immense. They only kept him under control with a sleeping aroma, and seeing the prisoner, she couldn't help but gasp in amazement. She asked to get closer, but the guard warned that it was too dangerous. The girl insisted that since the prisoner was completely restrained, he couldn't do anything, but the guard was firm and strictly forbade touching the cage, calling the beastman a very dangerous creature. Still, the heroine moved closer to the cage. Alone with the captive beastman, the maid quietly called his name, Hoyan. The prisoner's ear twitched almost imperceptibly. Ciela firmly promised to help him get out of there, but only if he helped her too. She told him to nod if he agreed. There was a small explosion. Suddenly, Ciela's actions were interrupted by a guard, who screamed in terror, asking what she had done. Suddenly, the guard took a serious hit, and the next second, he dropped dead.